Good morning. Welcome to the Carroll County Board of Commissioners open session for September 26th. And as we always prefer to do, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think last week we started on the right, so it's Commissioner Rothstein's turn.
So I got a couple things. One is last week had a meeting with Maryland VA and family along with DGS regarding the VA home that's going to be built on Slacks Road. Again, the exciting part about this, besides taking care of our veteran community, is it's being funded 1/3 by the state and 2/3 by federal government, with lots of opportunity for Carroll Countyans to be employed at this facility. The intent is to break ground in 2025, and with it being, maybe a ribbon cutting by 2027 at some point. So pretty excited about that. A lot of enthusiasm moving forward with that project. Yesterday, I went to a ribbon cutting for the Glenwood Academy. That was pretty exciting. They moved from Howard County to Carroll County on Progress Way in Sykesville, or Eldersburg for that matter. It's a academy or a school for, I think, 1st through 12th grade, maybe K through 12, for kids with autism and special needs. Really impressed. A lot of enthusiasm. Spoke with the faculty along with the donors and the board of directors. There's just a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of the kids were there also on hand telling their stories. So again, another way for Carroll County to take care of Carroll Countyans. The last thing, again, going with the same theme about taking care of our community, we have the high holidays coming up next week. Rosh Hashanah begins sundown on the Wednesday, and on Thursday and Friday will be when Rosh Hashanah occurs. There'll be just prayers, and we will congregate on London Town Boulevard. So where Stratosphere is down in Eldersburg, right next to it is where the congregation will take place, and it's going from 10 to about 2, and everyone is welcome to that. And then 10 days after that, on Saturday, all day will be Yom Kippur with the same celebration, bringing in the new year, same place next to Stratosphere. If there's any questions or about these ceremonies or these events, let me know, and I'll also share this with our staff to push this out as well. So that's all I have today. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Vigliotti, you're next.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Kyler. Just a couple quick things myself this morning. First of all, I want to say thank you to Senator Cardin, who recently spoke out with concerns about the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project. So it's nice that the senator is involved now and lending his voice to raising concerns about that project. Second, yesterday evening, I participated in a virtual public hearing regarding a proposed industrial solar development on Fannie Dorsey Road. I joined a number of our citizens and a number of my colleagues up here and in the county in doing so to oppose that solar development. And I want to commend Commissioner Rothstein for co-hosting that. I want to commend Commissioner Guerin for the comments that he made last night, and I want to commend our Director of Planning and Land Management for the comments that he made last night, Chris Hine. I spoke myself, and I think that we made our case pretty effectively that industrial use of agricultural land is not an agricultural use. And so there we are. And then, of course, our esteemed county attorney with his very slicked back hair last night. So we're grateful that he was also a part of it.
From my basement.
Not the garage?
Second, this week I also had the privilege of joining this month's meeting of the Commission on Aging and Disabilities. The committee was extremely happy with how the recent Aging Your Way Expo turned out. They were very grateful that so many of the members of the Board of Commissioners were able to attend that morning. And I want to thank everybody who made that expo possible, including the committee dedicated to that expo. I specifically want to single out Victoria Parks, who was the driving force behind that event. And they let me know yesterday that the swing from post-pandemic numbers is still on the rise. They estimate that they had at least 1,400 attendees the other week, but they can't quite be sure because a number of people were sneaking in other entrances. But they figured they had at least 1,400 people. They are still looking, the Commission on Aging and Disabilities is still looking for members to participate on the commission from the Manchester and Finksburg area. So if you know anybody or you are in either of those areas and interested in serving on COAD, it's definitely worth doing so. It's a wonderful and welcoming group of people who are devoted to serving and enhancing the quality of life for those who are aged and or with disabilities. And just as one last brief note, there are 4 upcoming workshop series that are going to be taking place at the senior centers. The first of is Powerful Tools for Caregivers, which will be running from October 15th to October 19th. The second is Chronic Conditions Self-Management, and that'll be running from October 28th through December 9th. The third is Diabetes Self-Management, and that'll be running from November 6th through December 11th. And the last is Chronic Conditions Self-Management Lay Leader Training, which will run from November 4th through December 17th. And that is all for me this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Gordon.
Thank you. First and foremost, wanted to congratulate not only the winners, but all of the individual businesses and business owners that were part of the Carroll's Best winners from the Carroll County Times of 2024. A lot of great businesses countywide. I'm not going to highlight any specifics as there's just too many to talk about, but the reality is it's just great that we have such a wonderfully strong business community, and we have a community that supports them. So whether you won or you were nominated, congratulations to everybody that was included and to the winners as well. Last Thursday after session, myself and my colleagues met with the state's attorney and the community education liaison, Tim Weber, outside the county office building, where we took a photo for Recovery Month. Obviously, a very important topic every month and every day in our community, and as always, glad to support the works of our state's attorney's office and the community as a whole. Last night, the Community Foundation of Carroll County held their Philanthropist of the Year Awards. As always, a great event and a great turnout. Their key philanthropists they noted this year were several, including Reverend Dr. Sue Shorb Sterling of Westminster Youth Project, the September Song, Be a Ray of Sunshine Foundation, and Appy Time Learning, Patricia Pearson. Great group. As always, Philanthropist of the Year just goes to show what kind of involvement our community has when it comes to needs of others and just philanthropic giving throughout the county. So as always, congratulations to those that were recognized last night. Also up and coming, we have the first inaugural Veterans Day Parade in Westminster. So the Door to Virtue Lodge 46 and Carroll County Veterans Independence Project will be starting this on November 9th will be the Saturday that will take place. It's kind of fascinating and interesting that Westminster is noted for their Memorial Day Parade that was started in 1868 and is considered one of the longest running in the nation, but interestingly enough, we've never had a Veterans Day parade. Well, that's going to change starting this year. A lot of groups have already signed up, a number of the veterans organizations, so that should be a good event coming up in November. And last but certainly not least, while my colleagues were interacting last night on the hearing, I was in attendance at the Carroll County Realtors 2025 installation. It was a good opportunity to talk to our local realtors, listen to some of the concerns regarding housing and also their significant concerns regarding this power lines and what it's doing not only to property ownership, but also affecting individuals looking to buy or sell property. So there's definitely a significant concern from them as well, and it was a good evening. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Garin.
Thank you. Good morning, Carroll County. As was mentioned, the first virtual public hearing was conducted last night at the Public Service Commission and the Administrative Law Judge presiding. I want to thank him for the way he ran that meeting. He gave everybody who attended an opportunity to speak, and then there were some rebuttals, and I thought he was very accommodating, and that's the way it should be for public hearings. So my thanks to him, and my thanks to all the residents of Fannie Dorsey Road who were in attendance, and to all those who hopefully wrote in comments as well. As was mentioned, there are not one, there are two solar projects designated for Fannie Dorsey Road. Case 9736, that's Spring Valley Solar, and case 9735, that's Chaberton. That's a lot of solar for one little road. So there will be a public hearing, looks like it's scheduled for the 13th of November for Chaberton, which is the easternmost project. But again, I want to thank everybody for attending. And if you're concerned about solar, if you're concerned about what's going on in Fannie Dorsey and you didn't attend the meeting and you haven't written in, that's too bad, because it is in your backyard. I have no problem with individuals, the not in my backyard crowd. I completely understand that. I completely understand why people are concerned about their views and their property values and things of that nature. But what I don't understand is if people are upset enough about something, why they don't get involved. And I think that's endemic in our society right now. And I've never understood how on the local level, whether it's the county government or even your town, if you see something, say something. You're paying these folks salaries. It's your backyard. So hopefully there were more comments made, because we have probably had hundreds of people chime in on these two specific projects. There was a good attendance last night, but not as many as I thought. So hopefully people have written in. So I wanted to mention that. And then I also wanted to mention that Stop MPRP, we're talking about now the power line issue. Stop MPRP, the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project, they're having a fundraiser this weekend from 2 to 7 at Linganore Farms over in Frederick County. I want to make sure everybody understands that Stop MPRP is a nonpartisan organization. There's no politics involved with that organization whatsoever. So you will hear us reference it often. They're usually stationed at our forums. It's not hard to find their signs within the county. They're all over my district. But I want to make sure people understand that. Please educate yourself on these power lines. I was at a public forum, a semi-public forum weeks ago, and the board was accused of not protecting people's property rights because we're opposing MPRP. Yeah, everybody's sitting there in stunned silence. That makes absolutely no sense. So, if you're going to get in a forum, just do a little bit of homework. I get it. Social media is social media. I don't mind comments on there. It doesn't bother me. But at least have a modicum of education behind it. So MPRP, and I'll conclude with saying, and Commissioner Vigliotti referenced this, the number of people who are voicing concern, voicing opposition, the number is growing. And my concern is that that number has to continue to grow, and it has to continue to be heard by elected officials in the state of Maryland. I am cautiously optimistic that we're going to be successful in one form or another, but we've got to stick together, but we've got to make sure we're reaching out to elected officials in the state of Maryland about this issue and making sure that they are hearing you. So continue with that as well. And that's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to mention two things that happened yesterday, and then I'll mention later where I was. But I was out of town, so I did not take part in the solar hearing or the philanthropist function. And the solar hearing, I think we were well represented, and it sounds like everybody made a good talk. The one thing I want to emphasize is there will be a second local opportunities from PSC on all the projects, and we'll try to keep up to date on when they are, but you'll be able to be there in person instead of just virtually. The Philanthropist of the Year function, last year I was away too, but Rhonda and I did donate to it, and I've heard from them, because I've asked, they evidently had issues with emails and getting the word out. I didn't know about it till a couple days before, and which is fine. But I'm assuming when I don't, a lot of other people don't. So it's a good event, and I'm sure it was good attendance. But I hope they're able to get their communication stuff worked out. MPRP, I'll mention that quickly also. That group started out as a Facebook group, but like you say, they're a very viable, nonpartisan group. And their fundraisers, one of the things I think they're going to do is they're going to hire an attorney. And I've heard from some property owners who have a lot of property affected, and like they said, a bunch of signs and a bunch of stuff on Facebook isn't going to stop this. But that is getting them a bigger and stronger group that hopefully can afford attorneys, and that maybe will stop it. So like Commissioner Guerin said, they're a good group to support. And there's a couple other groups too that are good to support. And my worry is twofold. When PSCG comes out with their route, they had 11, they've eliminated 6, and I think within a week they may be down to 1, and we'll hear it. Hopefully, 3/4 of the county doesn't breathe a sigh of relief and say it doesn't affect me, so I'm done. We got to fight it as a group. And then also, as they get into it, what I'm hearing from other areas is a lot of property owners do agree with their contract and the money they're given and do it, and they have every right to do that. But if they don't want it, they have every right to fight it. And I believe in local control, and I just hope it's been a blessing. Today's world is so hateful. It's been non-political. It's been pretty positive. Once in a while, like you had said, you'll hear at these forums somebody speak out that just doesn't have a clue. But I just hope as we don't get divided, either geographically or politically or whatever, as this processes, because that'll kill us fighting it. This past weekend, and I mentioned that last Thursday, I met with a bunch of fraternity brothers from college, and yes, Commissioner Rothstein, some of us are still alive. It was a great event. We were all going to go to the Orioles game. As it turned out, the Orioles seemed to be on fire at the right time of the year, unlike last year. It was their last home game was standing room only. So several of the brothers said, I'm not standing for that long, and we went out to eat instead. But it's great, and another conflict with things coming up. October 1st, I think, is the first home wild card game, and who knows if it'll be afternoon or night. That's yet to be determined, but I'm sure a lot of people have tickets for that, and that's going to negate any other obligation they had that day. Yesterday, I was in Crisfield. It's always great to go down there, and you forget how diverse Maryland is. It was the Miller Tall's Crab Feed, and it's always fun. You always see a lot of people. We were in one of the lobbyists, Bruce Bariana's tent, which is always nice. And he gets, I don't know, 50 people were waiting on tables and doing stuff, but they're all local. A couple of the ladies were showing us pictures of that area within the last week, and I think 2 of them actually were in kayaks going down the street. It is so flat down there, and I told, we had 2 tables there, and I told everybody, assume you're going to walk through water. It's so flat down there, but evidently they've had schools closed and some serious flooding. But it's still part of Maryland. I love Carroll County, but I love Maryland too. Some of the staff and some of us have been actively looking at permits and planning, procedures and fees. And in most cases, I think, it's not cheap to do any of it, but it probably doesn't cover the costs. So, but we all need to, I think, look at, are the fees reasonable and fair? Should nonprofits or anybody have exemptions or a break? And we are looking at it. So if somebody has thoughts on it, chime in, let us know. We had our cabinet meeting this week. We do that every other week, and that's always good, and it's great to hear from everybody. And for most part, a very cheerful, informative meeting. Also had Ag Center Board. Again, a big group is on their board, and the Ag Center has a lot of stuff going on. It's one of the jewels of Carroll County, and I'll do an email on some of the stuff we talked about, but they have minutes of their meetings, and I'm sure they wouldn't care if other people showed up. Speaking of that, this afternoon at 3 o'clock is the MDOT CTP Fall Tour. I don't think the Director of Transportation will be here, but a lot of the staff will be here. Probably a lot of people representing District 7, which covers Carroll County. It's a 3 to 5 meeting down in the Reagan Room, and it is a public open meeting. So if you haven't been personally invited, you're still welcome to attend. And it's a pretty good meeting and some good information and a good time if you have concerns. There'll be some public comments and speak your concerns. I already mentioned MPRP enough. Solar I've mentioned enough. And again, it's local control and property rights, and it's a tough fight. And I the only thing I want to mention, and I don't think anybody is sitting here, and most definitely most people in Carroll County are not anti-solar. Many of the farmers, we talked about that at the Ag Center, they have some big solar panels that furnishes power for the barn, for the outbuildings, for the house, for their property, and they all love that. And I've said this before, and I'm sure I'll get some calls and emails, and I can take it. Very rarely are these solar projects done by a farmer who's farmed and doing it. It's development kind of people buy ag remainders and they do it, and it's a good profit in it, and the solar companies, it's a good profit in it. One of the things we heard at our last meeting with PSEG and PJM, renewable energy in Maryland is about 8%, and that's great. And I think we've done a lot on cleaning up our environment over the years, but if you double that 8%, it's still less than a fifth of the energy. It's not the ultimate answer to solve everything, but it's a plus in it. And I feel strongly we need to look at nuclear. We need to look at natural gas, which is clean. It's fossil isn't a four-letter word, but some people think it is, but it's a clean use of energy, and we really need it. And thank you for giving me a few minutes. Our next item is the proposed creation of Chapter 161, Development Rights and Responsibilities. And as they come up, can you tell us what our options are and what the procedure is? I think we have a caller, and,
Well, the purpose of today is
well, one second. With Roberta not here yet, will you take the cards for public? Is anybody here wants to speak? And if you do, you need to fill out one of the cards in the back. And normally we lay them over there, but it looks like nobody's going to read them. So if anybody's interested in speaking, please fill out a card. Now, go ahead. What's the rules?
okay.
What are we allowed to do and what can I do?
Well, right now we're just we're here to solicit public comment on this proposed new chapter, which would authorize the county to enter into what are called development rights and responsibility agreements with individual developers. This proposal was advertised in the Carroll County Times on September the 12th, as well as September the 19th, 2024. We have our two experts from our planning department with us today, Daphne Daly and Director Hind. They're here to give you a short summary of what's being proposed.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners.
Do we want to do public comment first, or do you think maybe
I
you
think-
present and then do
Yeah,
it?
I think if we could do a quick presentation, that'll set the stage, and Daphne will be doing that. And then as far as options following the public hearing, we follow your lead. So if you would like to have a discussion today, we can certainly continue that. If you would like us to schedule a separate work session where we can do a deep dive into what the regulations are that are proposed, we can certainly do that. If you're ready to adopt, we follow your lead. So all the options are on the table.
Okay.
But with that, I'll turn it over to Daphne to set the stage.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm just going to run through a few slides to reacquaint you with our topic here, as well as familiarize folks who may be listening to what we're talking about here. So this is development rights and responsibilities agreements. This is a negotiated development agreement that takes place between a local government and a developer, which establishes the conditions under which a particular development may proceed. It's unique to each individual development project. So by enacting the legislation to allow for DRRAs, that basically just sets up the condition for these individual unique agreements to be executed if that moves forward. A key element of the DRRA is that when that agreement is signed, the laws and regulations related to the use of the property are essentially frozen at the time of the agreement. So this includes things like the density and intensity of development that's allowed, as well as other parameters that might be specified in the agreement. This means that the property is not subject to subsequent changes in planning and zoning. There are a few benefits to having a DRRA that are important to understand. One is that it provides the developer with stability in land use regulations for the duration of the project. So particularly when we're talking about multi-year development projects or large-scale projects that take place over a long period of time, that stability can be a very important factor. The community may also get some additional development if that's something that, or additional benefit if that's something that is negotiated as part of the agreement. And it's also important to remember that local government can still change regulations when it's essential to protecting public health, safety, and welfare. So even though things are sort of frozen in place at the time of the agreement, if there is a compelling reason to change things related to protecting health, safety, and welfare, that is still allowable. The ability to sign a DRRA is provided for in the Maryland Land Use article, and there are a number of things that state law requires be part of that agreement. That includes the duration of the agreement, the permissible uses on the property, the density and intensity of the uses on the property, maximum height and size of structures allowed, description of the permits that'll be required, and a description of the conditions, terms, restrictions, or other requirements determined by the local jurisdiction to be necessary to ensure the public health, safety, and welfare. So that's where the kind of variability came in terms of our discussion with the Planning Commission. So they looked at several things that might be applicable specifically to Carroll County that they wanted to recommend to you. These included things like thresholds for applicability, in other words, what size project would be required, or the minimum size that would be needed for a DRRA, the duration of DRRAs, the role of the Planning Commission, public notification requirements, and whether there should be a requirement for enhanced benefits. Just briefly to bring us up to date here, this was first brought up in April of this year, at which time you all directed staff to work with the Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation on amendment to the code to allow DRRAs to be executed. Over the course of 5 meetings from May to August, the Planning and Zoning Commission worked on developing the language. That's the subject of this hearing today. And then we brought that recommendation to you on August 22nd, and you all directed us to have a public hearing, which brings us to today.
Where can the public see the proposed regulation?
I believe that's on our website as part of the information related to the public hearing.
I believe the county attorney's office posted on as part of the public notification as well.
Okay, and we have a caller, and again, if anybody in the room wants to speak, please fill out a card and give it to Roberta to our right, your left. And you have a caller?
Yes, sir. We have a caller, Miss Kelly Schaefer Miller. If you could use *6 to unmute, you'll have 3 minutes, and please identify yourself.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's Kelly Schaefer Miller, 73 East Main Street, Westminster, Maryland, 21157. I appreciate the opportunity to call in this morning. I'm a bit under the weather, so I'm going to publicly comment this way instead of in person this morning. I am speaking to you this morning on behalf of St. John Properties, and although I am speaking on their behalf, I am going to generically speak towards the text amendment because we understand that this is an amendment to the entire code that has, widespread implications. The DRRA enabling legislation is truly a tool to be used. And in saying that, what I mean is that as staff has presented, one of these agreements must be mutually agreed upon. Sorry, I have a little one at home with me today as well, as you can just hear in the background. This is an agreement that must be mutually agreed upon by both parties. There is no ability for one party to compel the other, the developer in this case, to compel the county to enter into an agreement. So it is truly done when both parties believe that there is a benefit to having an agreement in place. There's also been a little bit of a misunderstanding, I think, not necessarily by this commission, but by other members, that this perhaps could override zoning, meaning that you could agree to increase density or something through this tool. That is not the case. The DRRA does not allow one to override zoning. So the underlying zoning would still guide the development of the property. This DRA is a tool for larger scale development, specifically with an extended build out period, because as Daphne just stated in her presentation, it offers the developer an assurance that no regulations will be changed during the term of the agreement. And in offering that assurance, it also allows then, in turn, the developer to offer some sort of benefit above what would be required. An example of that could be additional infrastructure. So the draft ordinance that is before you today is largely lifted from the state code. And therefore we've been involved, reviewed, and have no comments. We are okay with it largely. The one request we would make before you is that the references to the enhanced benefits from that code section be removed. The reason for that is because this is, like I said, a mutually agreed upon document. So there's not going to be a situation where the county does not want to enter into one of these if they're signing one of these. By codifying that ambiguous term of that enhanced benefit language, what that does is that opens the door for a third party to challenge an agreement that the county wants to enter into. And that's not a position that the developer or we think the county would want to be in, where then it's taken out of the commissioner's control and potentially put in the hands of a judge. That enhanced benefit language is not something that's required by state code, nor is it contained in any of the other local municipalities enabling legislation. I believe you're aware that Tawnytown, Mount Airy, and Hampstead all have enabling legislation, and that is not language that is contained in any of their codes either. So it's a few revisions to sections the definition section, and then section 161.004, subsections 11 and 12 that we would request be removed. Aside from that, we would request respectfully that this commission adopt the proposed text. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the audience members I noticed smiled when there was background noise.
The little boy has COVID also. This morning.
Anybody want to give public comments that is here?
Tom Peelan.
Usually my business card's a lot smaller than that one, but anyway. Good morning. My name is Thomas Pelon. I'm Executive Vice President of Development for St. John Properties. I've been here before and appreciate the opportunity to speak very quickly today. I just want to, I guess, re-echo a couple things that Kelly made reference to, one being the enhanced public benefit. I don't think it can be stressed enough that the county is not required to enter into these agreements, period. If the county chooses to do that, I think it should be the decision of ultimately the commissioners to make that decision, and not, kind of leave it subject to somebody disagreeing with that, filing an appeal or whatever, and ended up in front of a judge, and then the judge gets to decide whether it was a benefit or not. And just to speak a little bit specifically about the project that we're pursuing right now, which is the Beatty property. And we've been working on that project for a couple of years now. We are at concept. We don't have any formal approvals, basically, of anything other than a traffic study. And we had a conditional use approved for the 55 plus, or the retirement village element of that. But we continue to move through that process as anybody would need to. But it's a long process. We've been working on our project, Liberty Exchange, since 2007, give or take, and we still have portions of that site to build out. We think that Carroll County is a great market. We want to be here, but it's a slower market. It's a slower absorption rate. So we anticipate that when we break ground, hopefully next summer, give or take, at the Beatty property, that we're going to be a while to get that industrial district built out. It could be 10 years of build out to get there, or so, give or take. And so for those reasons, and the fact that, as there's always some pressure that comes up to reconsider or relook at something from a legislative perspective. As an example, since we started Liberty Exchange, and whether it's totally applicable or not, it gives you the order of magnitude. The county completely rewrote and remapped the industrial and commercial districts. There's a unique provision in your code now that addresses the fact that Liberty Exchange was developed under a unique provision of the code that kind of went away when that was done. And those changes that were made to the code were good, but they were very impactful, would have been very impactful to that project. So because of the kind of lack of predictability and some of the requirements that come along with doing a project of the magnitude of what we're contemplating getting into, which in this case is a master plan road that we've been working closely with the county. We've never really argued, hey, we shouldn't be required to build this road or whatever. We've said, okay, well, if this is important, let us see how we figure that out. But it's a real project, and it's going to take real money, real effort. So for all those reasons, we think
the county ought to at least have this, as Kelly referred to it, this tool in the toolbox of a DRRA, and then look at each project individually, and decide whether or not you think it's a good idea to enter into an agreement and provide some predictability as you know, a project like this goes through the process. Ran over a little bit, but thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. No more? I have a few questions. What does this change? And I'll start with the citizens of Carroll County. What do they gain? What do they lose if one of these is used?
I think one of the main benefits would be perhaps an incentive or an encouragement for long-term, large-scale development if the risk is reduced enough that that becomes more attractive where it otherwise wouldn't. So that's one of the gains for the county as a whole, is that enhanced potential for economic development activity. Of course, the other aspect is the enhanced public benefit that we've been talking about, whether that's codified or not. One of the underlying principles of entering into a DRRA is that it's a two-sided agreement. So as the commenters referenced, there's generally some part of that agreement negotiated among the parties that are signing it that in essentially giving up the opportunity to change development conditions over time, that the county gets some sort of benefit out of that. What that may be is sort of unique to each property, but there is the opportunity for that to benefit the community in the course of negotiation.
And you kind of answered how it affects the developers too, and that was my next question. But then,
Commissioner Kyler, before you go on to the next question, just to share a few things from my own experience with that. For example, with the residential development with Adara, citizens have come to receive pet areas, parks. There's cost sharing that can occur between the developer and the county. So there are a number of ways that will also benefit citizens, in addition to the security and the stability of a long-term project or predictability. So there are tangible physical things as well that can occur as well.
And then it's not mandatory. So what, in your minds, triggers the use of this? Why would you suggest it to a developer, or the developer would have to ask, and then who okays it?
Yeah, so that's all part of the draft ordinance. The trigger is generally the request from the developer, I would assume, since this is something that is designed to primarily benefit the developer. We do have thresholds, which I briefly mentioned in the presentation, that address kind of which types of projects would be eligible. So let's see here. If it's a residential development, the proposal is that the property must contain at least 125 dwelling units to be eligible to execute an agreement like this. If it's in whole or in part a non-residential development, then the threshold would be a minimum size of at least 25 acres in order to be able to execute this. And again, that was geared towards this idea of the DRRAs being primarily beneficial to large-scale, long-term development projects. There is a certain amount of work that would be required to negotiate and execute the agreement. So we want to make sure that, number one, it's achieving its main purpose, and number two, it's not incurring outsized time and effort relative to the scale of the project. which usually, if it's a small-scale project and can be built out in a relatively short period of time, the chance that the rules and regulations would change over that course of time are much, much reduced.
So if I'm a developer and I ask for one, and it happens, when we sign it, I'm grandfathered in. Now, there could be rules changed that we can't control, but other than that, I'm grandfathered in. If I don't do this, when am I grandfathered in? Or never? Or maybe?
Some of that depends on you all. So for instance, when you've changed zoning text and things like that, you always have the option to make that provision that certain properties can be grandfathered under those changes. It's not an automatic.
And so, if I may add, that the grandfathering typically applies to projects that are in process. So if they have not received their final site plan approval and they're in process, then it would be up to the board as to whether changes in regulations would grandfather those projects in process. Once you have your site plan approval, then you're kind of set, but those site plans have an expiration date. And so if you hit that expiration date, the developer may request to myself for an extension of that site plan approval. And we typically check to see if there are any significant codes that have changed that would require to relook at it. But that site plan approval can be extended indefinitely.
If I can add a couple things. The value we have here at the dais is really twofold. One is the experiences we bring to the table, and then the second is the value that you bring, in your expertise and leadership, Chris and Daphne and the whole teams, along with the commissions and boards that we asked to review this. So I'm going to take this step from experiences that I bring, and the two is, one is as a commissioner going in my second term, there have been projects that have, not language ain't the right word, that have crossed over, and we I don't want to say we have to reinvent the wheel often, but it challenges us as to having a smooth transition in a project, regardless of where it is in the county. And I'm looking countywide. This is not about the Beatty property or Liberty Exchange. This is about Carroll County. It ain't about one person's district. It's about what's good for Carroll County in master plan and vision and expectations. And that leads me to my second point regarding vision and expectations. When I was in command of the installation, we had a vision of building a resiliency and education center, taking a building and completely renovating it from head to toe to head, whatever it is. And major contractors, lots of engagements. It took over 10 years to go from start to finish. It went through multiple commands. Fortunately, the vision stayed the same with each command. It didn't have to, and that was always a challenge because the convincing effort had to take place. I think if this was put in place, then that command could go and move on to other activities. To me, that was important. We did, cut the ribbon every time. We always said, you may be the one digging a hole, but you're not going to cut the ribbon because it's going to take so long. That is definitely true, especially for these large projects. So giving stability to both the developer and expectations and stability to the community, to me, is huge. That's why we do these master plans, and, I applaud the work, again, that you're doing in getting us to this table. So, I'm all for a tool in the toolbox, meaning we don't have to use it if it doesn't make, relevant sense, but if it's available to us for strong expectations and growth in the county where growth belongs, or is needed, then, again, our focus is the budget. Our focus is bringing revenue into the county for the school's safety and quality of life. And if this gets us to the next step, then this is something we should strongly consider. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I had two quick questions, if I might. You had mentioned the municipalities in the county that use it. What surrounding counties currently use this?
I know that Frederick County has it on the books. Howard County did. I don't know that it currently does. I'd have to go back through our notes. They've been used it at different times for different purposes. I don't know that our surrounding counties have used them super recently.
Okay. And then the other question, obviously, this came before planning and zoning, and now it's before us up here. In the process, you mentioned the parties negotiating. From the county side, who's representing the county as the negotiator or the parties negotiating?
It's in the draft ordinance. It's not specified. The petition is to be submitted to the county administrator or their designee. Then the other references that are in here are to the county governing body. So it's kind of a little bit open, but generally speaking, directed to the county administrator, and then the different entities that would be sort of stakeholders in that process.
Okay.
So I believe, I don't know that we've talked about it extensively with Roberta and so on, but the anticipation, at least in my mind, would be that the initial request would come to Roberta, and then her designees would form a work group committee type to look and delve into the details and so on, and then work with the Board of County Commissioners on final details and obviously the ultimate acceptance.
Sure. And then refresh my memory on this, Chris, if you could. There was some mention, I think when we were looking at some other draft versions, it might have been, there was talk with the negotiation that certain parties might be precluded from that if there was, and I'm not saying we would have this, but there was something about conflict of interest or some sort of thing that was mentioned at one point regarding, I can't remember if it was elected or what that was, but there was mention of that.
I believe one of the versions that was looked at included a provision that any sort of negotiation or discussion with the developer had to happen in an open meeting.
Okay. Thanks.
Just curious, Commissioner Gordon, what was the Planning Commission's recommendations coming into this meeting?
It was kind of interesting. That's probably the best way I could word that, because initially, as we started to look at it, the belief was that, this would be something to have that would be of assistance. But then as we started looking at some of the surrounding counties, because there are some counties that have had this and then they've gotten rid of it.
Yeah.
So it almost became a question with some of the members of planning and zoning as to, what is the real value? While they could see it, they didn't see it as a obvious choice, I guess I would say, from some of the members. But there was nobody that was specifically against it.
Okay.
It was just more of a question of, is this just adding more of a formality to a process, or are we actually seeing this, transition into an area that makes things much more smoother?
Okay.
So oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just real quick. I couldn't remember if we had included it or not, but I just found it, that we do have a section, 161012, that states any negotiations between a member of the county governing body, which would be the Board of County Commissioners, and the applicant or the applicant's agents concerning an agreement shall be conducted in open session.
Okay.
So there's that provision, that open transparency regarding negotiations.
And there, if I could also add as well, there is a provision that that the petition would be shared with the Planning Commission to make sure that it conforms with the master plan as well.
I apologize.
So, that's important to know. So, I mean, to follow up on one of Commissioner Gordon's questions, I seem to recall back in April, when you were before us to talk about this, you might have referenced the fact that a couple counties removed the DRRA from their repertoire or toolbox, whatever you want to call it. So I think that was the correct, I think that was what happened with that particular issue with related to counties. So I've got a couple comments. The first one is really an administrative comment. So we're talking about a potential text amendment to our Carroll County ordinances. I've been very, very consistent about this, but the impetus for doing this, in terms of who is the impetus for doing this, I think should be included on these items. When you came before us back in April, I wasn't aware that this was an issue. The spark to do these types of things should be with one of the 5 sitting commissioners. So, what's the impetus for doing this? And I'm going to continue to say, whether it's any sort of text amendments, that if somebody's done the work behind the scenes to make this an issue, to raise it to the issue of a text amendment, to make it an item on here, why isn't a commissioner willing to put their name on here and be the primary defense for enacting it? I mean, I don't want to sound accusatory, but if somebody's fingerprints are all over a proposed text amendment, they should be willing to have their name on it and talk about it. So I don't know what happened there. I'd like to know why we're having this discussion right now. What's the impetus for this? Is it a particular issue, and why? And then as far as the DRRA itself, I mean, I think you'd be hard-pressed to come up with a real concrete answer as to how this helps the county residents. I mean, I think, in my opinion, and I said this back in April, I think it ties our hands, and I don't like that. I think that it's important to be able to have that flexibility. So I'm still concerned about this and why we're doing it. Some of the, and hopefully, residents are paying attention, because this is kind of a big one, if you ask me. I mean, they need to be aware of what this is, and if it provides just another tool, then that's one thing. But in my opinion, this is a fairly monumental change to our ordinances, and it deserves a lot of attention, and I hope people are doing that.
Anybody else? And I understand your concerns. My one concern, I truly want staff who deal with this stuff every day to be able to come to us and say, we think you ought to consider some proposed changes. I don't think, no offense to everybody up here, well, I'll just say myself, I'm not smart enough to know what every department does and what is a problem and what works. So I don't feel as much that a commissioner's name should be on it. Now, I'm not sure what your point was. Now, if a commissioner did come to them and say, you need to look at this, then yeah, we need to own up and say, yeah, Commissioner Kyler said, do this. And we need to own up to it. But if they come to us and, like in April, and we say, yeah, look at this, I don't know if it's an individual as much as all 5 of us or 4 of us or 3 of us said, look at this.
Sure.
You-
Yeah,
you-
no,
you
I
know.
understand that, and again, we deal with so many issues here. But when it comes to actual text amendments and changing the Carroll County ordinance, I think you need maximum transparency. Maximum transparency.
I agree.
And I've been very consistent about this for the last 2 years. We've had a couple issues that have been before us, and you can go back and review the videotape where I'm sitting up here and going, why are we talking about this? Who brought this up? Why is this an issue? Can somebody just tell me? And I don't know if I got those answers. And I think the people deserve
and
answers.
if you can get the answers, great. But besides that, I think for that reason, personally, we'd be fools today not to leave the record open for 10 more days because some people saw the agenda, some people hear about it today. I'll be honest, in my many, many years as being a Carroll County citizen, I don't remember ever looking at the commissioner's agenda. You know, so if 10 more days gets the word out to some more people, I think that's great. But it's hard. Like you say, I hope the public's paying attention, and I'll be honest, I normally didn't, unless I heard from somebody in this building like, oh, yeah, you really ought to come talk about that. Anything else from commissioners? We have one more public comment?
If you want, there's one more. Do you want to allow it? You want to allow it?
Sure.
Okay.
I think.
Schaefer.
We want public comment, even if it's a family member of somebody that already talked.
Thank you. I'm Clark Schaefer. I work for Kelly Schaefer Miller's law firm. First of all, it's on the front page of today's Carroll County Times, so it's out there for that. I think Commissioner Collar's question went to the nub of the issue about when is a developer grandfathered in. And in Maryland, it's very late. And that's the reason why the legislature put this enabling legislation into place. And where it is in Maryland is when you have a building permit and a visible structure coming out of the ground is when you're grandfathered under Maryland law. Now, and I think that the experience was that some developers that wanted their property owners that wanted to do projects that were very desirable in most people's mind said, it's a 5-year, 10-year project. I'm putting $20 million in. I'm not doing it. I just won't do it. And that happens out there in the real world, in the development world. Developers make choices, as you well know. Your economic development department can tell you that all the time. They're looking at other counties. And that leads into another reason why I think this is very important to put this in place, this enabling legislation, which, by the way, it is only a tool. It does not contain any iota of you have to do this. It's not there. But, you know, allow me to speculate. Some corporation, somebody out there that's investing in property has an event like they sell a $40 million property and their accountant tells them it's a like-kind exchange under IRS rules and they've got 6 months to invest the money. They call your economic development department and say, I'd like to buy that 300-acre parcel so-and-so or what and what. But, and I got to make a decision in 2 months, 60 days. And here's the general outline of my project, and I would like a DRA because I'm making my decision because I'm looking at Harford County, I'm looking at Frederick County, Washington County. And everybody goes, yeah, we would really like this to happen. I mean, it's just everybody, almost everybody, not the neighbors. But, and they go, well, guys, we don't even have enabling legislation. That's even if we hurry, it's 3-4 months, and maybe longer. We got to send it to the planning commission, and da-da-da-da-da. The guy says, well, such and such they have it, and they can start talking DRA today, not 6 months from now. And I got to make a decision in 6 months. And I think your economic development people will tell you that occurs in real life. In terms of I'm not going to do the other issues. I'm sure you'll appoint or designate people to negotiate for you if any of these come up. And once again, they only come into effect if you think it's a desirable project and if you think the terms negotiated are beneficial to the county. You always retain the ability to change your laws and rules if it's essential for public health, safety, welfare. So it's a tool, and we request that you favorably consider it and then go from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And since I opened up Pandora's box, I think we have another caller. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We have another caller that called in. I have had her in the breakout room. Catherine, could you please unmute yourself? You'll have 3 minutes. *6.
Am I on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. Catherine Adelaide, as just a citizen here, but one with extensive experience in zoning. I was a law clerk at a major zoning law firm in Prince George's County that rezoned most of the county. So I just heard about it, chipping in for my comment later in the session. I do appreciate you letting me come in, even if the public comment part of it had already occurred, because it is a public hearing. So I totally agree with Commissioner Guerin. Thank you for raising that red flag. Here's what development rights means, is developers coming in. So it should be looked at very carefully. I didn't know about it until this morning, and I guarantee you most of the citizens probably don't know about it because they're consumed with the power line issue, election issues, a lot's going on. So I really appreciate Commissioner Guerin's and whoever else is with that, raising the flag on it of going a little bit slower, especially because it's Carroll County. And I remember when I ran for commissioner, it was Keep Carroll, which is agricultural. So I'm just, chirping in with my development experience that I think it's good I'm glad you're keeping the record open. I will try to inform people that I know, but to me, it is something that should be, you should have extreme caution with, and everything's easier basically to get into than out of. So better to go slow on this one. I don't have my timer on, so someone will have to tell me when my time is up, but I do appreciate the comment and going slower on this and really making sure. It did seem, I guess, an administrator doing this, that could be an issue. I think again, everything has to come before the board. So I would definitely listen to your fellow Commissioner Guerin's comment on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more public comments? Any more commissioner comments?
I'll make a motion to conclude the public hearing and keep the record open for 10 calendar days.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further questions, discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
If I
you.
may ask one quick question, though, for a matter of planning, looking forward. So we will schedule to come back to you in a couple weeks after the record has been closed. Is there a desire to have a work session where we could spend a couple of hours talking about this, or do you feel that a regular open session meeting would be sufficient to come to resolution on this issue?
I think open session's fine.
I mean, the work session would be open session, so just.
Yeah,
it would
but
just
I'm
be
saying
way
the
we-
regular
we've
open
done it.
session's fine. I don't feel like we need a work session now. I made some notes, and sometime today, I'm sending both of you and probably Economic Development some emails with some more questions. And, but do you guys want to do a work session?
I think open session, just
Is
in
enough.
here, I think would hopefully be enough. I mean, between, I think, the five of us, if we have any questions, obviously we can ask. And of course, if the public wants to,
Yes.
send in information, which,
Yeah, And I think if the consensus is regular open session's fine, if we get some comments in the next 10 days that change our thinking,
Absolutely.
we'll holler.
Very good. Thank
You
you.
guys good with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we want to, with no pressure, talk about solar site design requirements. And no decision will be made today. And and part of it, which you probably will, is what's happening after today about this.
All right. Good morning again, Commissioners.
Good morning
So,
again.
I believe you've heard about solar development, and we're here to continue a discussion that we brought before you a couple months ago. Just to provide some basic background, just to reaffirm, it is the county's stance and philosophy, and we have put it into regulations that the industrial development of solar facilities on agricultural land is not appropriate. And we're not looking to change anything along those lines. What's been a hot topic for discussion, especially over the past year or so, is that the state has the authority that's been shown in case law that they can preempt local zoning regulations. And through a process, through the Public Service Commission, with the issuance of what's called a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity for these solar projects on agricultural land, despite our local zoning regulations to the contrary. And currently, there are 7 projects that are going through that process. Yes, sir.
And maybe you're going to talk that as you go through it, but there's also the potential this session to see legislation, maybe even changing this, but that doesn't tie our hands on doing this now, correct?
Correct, yes. There has been discussion at the state level regarding additional regulations that could potentially further erode our authority, but it hasn't passed. It's just discussions now. And as you know, the speed at which things get passed and get put into place in the state, there's going to be a gap between today and when those regulations go in place. And so my opinion is it would be beneficial for us to have guide rails in place that then we feel are appropriate in that interim.
And maybe these will still be viable after that, and if they're not, then we need to adjust.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. So, yeah, as I indicated, there's 7 projects currently going through the process. I have them listed on the screen. They are listed in order of when the applications have come in. The one that's furthest along is Pine Rock on Sullivan Road. There is a second public hearing that's going to be in person at Exploration Commons here in Westminster on October 9th at 5:30, if anybody is interested in participating in that public hearing. So that's background on the situation. The reason why we're here is that our code related to solar development evolved over time, and we addressed different zoning districts with their own individual requirements. So we had a section of code related to solar development on industrial land. We had a section on solar development on commercial land, et cetera. There was a lot of duplication, and there were some minor differences. Section 158, 153E was specific to solar development on agricultural land, and that section of code was removed. And that section of code had those specific design requirements for development on agricultural land. So we removed those, and at the time, it made perfect sense, because why have specific design requirements for something we don't allow? However, now that we have projects coming through the CPCN process, we'll be faced with reviewing projects on ag land with no guide rails in place as to what we review those projects against. And so our intent was twofold here. One is to develop general guidelines that would apply to all solar development, so we're consistent and predictable for those developers, as well as have some guide rails in place for these projects that are coming through the CPCN process. So a couple things that I just wanted to make sure that is perfectly clear in everybody's head. One is that a caution on unreasonable guidelines. We could certainly put in place things like a setback of 2,000 feet that would virtually make any solar development in the county impossible. However, we will immediately be preempted by the state. So our goal is to put in reasonable restrictions and reasonable guidelines or requirements that solar developers will not have reason to complain, that they can work within, but do provide our citizens with some measure of protection and meet kind of our goals of what we're trying to accomplish. The other thing is that as we last year went through work sessions and so on, we were discussing the solar code. There were a number of items that were brought up for discussion related to things like stormwater management, erosion sediment control, and so on. What I want to reiterate is that those site development requirements that exist in other codes, in the county codes, related to stormwater management, grading, water resources, forest conservation, floodplain management, and so on, those are unchanging, and these projects will have to conform to those codes. So if there's a concern related to those aspects of things and we haven't covered them in this new text amendment, they are already covered. And we can certainly answer any questions you have about them, but they are already covered as they apply to all site development projects, not just solar development. So that's why we're here today. So as I said, we took a look at the entirety of Section 158, 153, and worked with Planning and Zoning Commission at your direction. Our intent today was not to go through every line of code. It's a couple pages long and wanted to be respectful of the time of open session here today. I have a quick summary here. Essentially, sections A through D were just a reorganization of the information that was already there related to roof-mounted and accessory use type of projects. I don't believe there's any concern related to those types of projects, as I believe was mentioned even in Priority Carroll, that there are a lot of agricultural operations that have solar as an accessory use to provide energy for their individual properties. And roof-mounted, I don't believe there's any concern related there. Section E, we added in to clarify the development review process. We just wanted to provide clarity that even a project that goes through the CPCN process needs to come through the Carroll County Development Review process for site development. So we wanted that to be absolutely clear. Then we added Section F, which are the generic requirements then for site development. And the topics that we hit were setbacks, location and appearance, signs, glare, electrical connections, landscaping, fencing, buffers, lighting, access, and decommissioning. So that brings us to today. We certainly can answer any questions that you may have, and we're looking for what the next steps are that you wish to take. Some options that we're throwing out there. One would be a work session where we would schedule, and it's an open session discussion, open to the public, et cetera, that we would schedule a couple of hours in an afternoon that we could walk through in detail all of the code requirements that we came up with the Planning and Zoning Commission. If, however, you feel that we have a good foundation to build from that we've presented to you, you could go ahead and schedule a public hearing to get input from the public. And then following the public hearing, there's all those options are still available. We could still have an additional work session or an open session discussion. We're basically looking today for your guidance as far as what the next steps that you would like to take. And then ultimately, we would request or hope that the text amendment would be eventually approved. From a timing perspective, the project that's furthest along, the Pine Rock Solar that we mentioned, and that there's a public hearing coming up in October, we feel it would be appropriate for us to have this text amendment in place within the next month or so, a month or two thereabouts, because we would like these code requirements to be in place when they finish out their CPCN process, and so they know what the next steps are with the county and what they have to design to. We are new to the CPCN process, and so we don't have familiarity yet with how fast they will move through the process, but certainly the second public hearing is one of the later steps in the process. I'm just not sure whether or how quickly the turnaround to actually issuing the certificate will be. So from a time perspective, we'd like to keep this moving and resolve it as soon as possible.
And I'll just mention this for the good of everybody. One of the things we discussed, obviously, and you can echo in on this, was with planning and zoning, was we were looking at, say, for example, setbacks. And so one of the things, initially the county was looking at some pretty significant setbacks. And we were looking at, surrounding counties and where they were in reference to us. And in, I think, all the cases, if I'm not mistaken, I think we were extensively larger on those setbacks. And the concern was, if we're so far out, an outlier, do we immediately get thrown out of the mix? And I think the easy answer is yes. Whether we, agree with them or not, I think without question, we'd be thrown out. So planning and zoning with staff did go through all of that, and we did make some initial adjustments that I think put us within the same parameters of, say, our surrounding counties. So I think that was a good move on our part to try to be closer to the overall picture versus us just being thrown out. For me personally, and I can't speak for any of my colleagues, I think given the time constraints and what we're looking at, I think it would probably be ideal to have them come back and have a hearing on that and to continue this process moving forward. And then if we need to have further discussion, because my concern would be, like we've had some other topics, we sort of like the cannabis issue. We don't want to be too far behind in getting things in place and making it, I guess, convoluted and difficult.
So just two questions, if I might. With respect to access under Section F on that previous slide, was any consideration with access given to emergency response? Because we know in other states there have been issues where these things have caught on fire. There have been issues where emergency management has had to get in. So the access would include something like that?
Yes, and that's actually a change that we noted that we made from what was presented to Planning Commission. So our recommendation when we were working with Planning Commission is we followed another jurisdiction's recommendations, which was to maintain at least a 16-foot wide access drive to these facilities. After we met with Planning Commission, it was pointed out to us by Development Review that we already have in our code requirements that there be an 18-foot access. So we made that change to the recommendations, but we called that out because it was a change from what Planning and Zoning Commission recommended. We don't think they would have any issue with that because we actually were presenting two choices, a 12-foot or a 16-foot, and they opted to recommend the 16-foot. And so making it 18-foot, we felt was an appropriate change, but we did want to call that out as it was a change from what was recommended by Planning Commission.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that.
One question on that. Unfortunately, I've seen Carroll County waive the width of an access, get it down to 12 foot for a business that a fire truck couldn't turn into. In my humble opinion, they're way too lenient on that. I mean, we can't avoid that people are going to whine about this and ask for waivers, or can we?
We can't. However, one tool, as it were, that is available to you all is that we could put in the code that no waiver of that requirement can be permitted. So if that's something that you strongly feel that a waiver of that 18-foot requirement is not permittable, we could certainly add that in, that a waiver is not allowed.
I think that's a good idea because, God forbid we have another situation like this summer where everything is incredibly dry, and again, God forbid one of those things catches on fire. That's a wildfire at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So my second question had to do with decommissioning. And if this is already part of the consideration, then just let me know. The decommissioning, I mean, is that going to include some kind of like clear enumerated plan about what's going to happen when a site is no longer being used? And specifically, I'd like to know whether or not there's a component in there about the financial responsibility for who has to bear the cost of that decommissioning.
Yes, there is. Yes, a decommissioning plan would be required of the developer to indicate exactly what would happen when the project is no longer viable. And we also have a component in there, then the decommissioning plan would have to move into place. There also is a surety requirement. So an estimate of what the cost to decommission and basically restore that property back to its original condition. And that would be approved by the county. And then 125% of that would be held in surety for the duration of the life of the project.
Very much.
And I'm sorry, one additional thing. We also have a provision in there that the county would have the authority every 5 years to go back and review that dollar amount to make sure that the amount of surety has maintained pace with whatever costs may be involved in decommissioning the project.
That's very thorough.
And that would include that the surety still, I think, nobody gets a bond for 20 years. So what happens if after 5 years you find out they didn't renew it?
So that we track very closely those bonds that the county holds, and as they start reaching their expiration, we absolutely are in contact with the developers and some property owners to ensure that those remain in effect.
Well, it goes without saying that the state and via this process through the Public Service Commission and the CPNCN process has really put the county in a tough position. And I don't know how we reconcile the fact that we're going to have, you know, something in our ordinance that's prohibited and then have something in our ordinance that says, well, this is what you're going to do if you decide to ignore essentially our ordinance. I think we can find ways to explain that to the people of the county and they generally understand, but it's still kind of hard to reconcile, and I can't really get my head around that right now, but that's for a later discussion. I would like just to make a couple suggestions to make sure that we apply any of these text amendments and ensure that they're specific to the CPCN projects, that's in there. So anybody who reads these doesn't think, oh, I can do it now. No, if you want to do it, you're going to have to go through the CPCN process, and that shouldn't change. And then I would also add, I did have the same concern about fire and EMS ability to respond to these things, and I think Access addresses some of that. But I think that we also have to make sure, like with any development review, the local, volunteer fire companies are well aware of what's going on. I can speak from experience that is not the case with some of these commercial projects. I'm not going to get into which one, but I was there when the fire company tried to get into it for a tour, and it was not pretty. This is an older project, but they have to be completely aware of what's going on, and they going to have to have plans. They're going to have a hazmat plan. They're going to have all kinds of plans, and so I would make sure we have that in there. Maintenance, which I think is somewhat addressed by some of these other requirements, but we've got to have some maintenance specifics in there, and security and safety. I think obviously fencing goes to security, but the county is growing. I mean, you've got to make sure people can't get in there and get hurt, but at the same time, it should be, the impetus should be on the onus should be on the owners of the property to make sure that people can't go in and create mischief too. I mean, that's just not acceptable. So I would ask for those three things to be considered, and again, to make sure that, we make sure the specificity is there as well.
Thank you very much. Was there just information?
You need to decide
today?
what the next steps are.
Okay. So we would like a work session about this. We don't want a work session about this.
Yeah, I guess, and do we want a public hearing? Do we want a work session, and what order?
Well, I mean, I guess maybe, and we want to move with this relatively quickly.
Yes.
Would you be able to get us copies of the changes, or not the changes, but the new, I guess, the additions that are being proposed to contend with this? We could certainly schedule. I wouldn't be opposed to a work session specifically. I mean, if it ends up taking us 3 hours, it takes us 3 hours. If it takes us 20 minutes, it takes us 20 minutes. But having something specifically for an issue of this magnitude that is affecting us in such a way, I think, is certainly in order. And then once we figure out what we want to see in those amendments, then we can certainly open it up to the public for a hearing. That would be my suggestion.
And I agree. I think work session as soon as possible, and that gives the public more info to then do a public hearing.
Yeah, that's fine.
So you're gonna make a motion?
Oh, do we need a motion to do that?
Yep.
We should, right? We
Please.
should direct you guys to do.
There's
I-
one specific there.
So I will make a motion to proceed with a work session and then subsequently a public hearing following the work session.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and that's enough direction, right?
Please,
And
yes, that's
All
fine.
those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hold on a second. Flip back to, I have an unrelated question, who'd
Sure.
have thought? Flip back to slide 3.
I don't have known to, is it this one?
Now,
Yes.
suppose I have 26 acres, and suppose somebody wants to do a utility easement 150 foot wide for a power line straight through my property. And they're gonna disturb between access and their bases, they're gonna disturb more than 5,000 square feet.
Yes,
Do they need all of these?
yes. That is our stance, and that's what we've discussed with the developer, the hypothetical developer that you're talking about. Yes, that they would still need to come through the county's process and development review process to address all of these applicable codes.
And then, if I have an easement like that through my property, what I've heard from them is 5 foot outside that easement, I could have a high-rise built. I don't want my house 5 foot outside that easement. Are there any setbacks or restrictions or not for something like that?
Not that I'm aware of. I believe that that's the intent of the 150-foot wide right-of-way that they typically request. Beyond, I don't think there are any additional requirements
Yes.
beyond that 150 feet. I think the intent is to keep all restrictions and so on within that
Within that.
corridor. Yes,
So in theory, they could do that easement 5 foot beside my house. Now, I have to, they have to do a contract and I have to sign it,
Sure.
so
Yes.
I can hire a lawyer and get everything I want. But there's no requirements that Carroll County, pretty much these things on this slide is what we can require.
yes.
So Commissioner Kyler touched on an interesting point. So the threshold right now to increase the level of stormwater management is 3,000 or 5,000
If you
square
disturb,
feet?
if you disturb 5,000 square feet or more, then you're into our stormwater code.
And would a solar panel field be considered, it would be considered disturbing there, right?
Yes. Now, historically, there have been some industry arguments, because if you look at a solar panel, it's on little tiny posts, and the argument has been made by the industry that if you add up all those little tiny posts, and it's less than 5,000 square feet, they're exempt. But that is not the viewpoint of MDE or ourselves, because there is greater disturbance in the construction of the facilities, and you start getting into issues with the shading of those panels on the vegetation underneath and so on.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And even I'm aware of the fact that there's an issue of if the ground's no longer pervious. And nothing says impervious like a solar panel. So that's another issue there. But you're tracking it.
Yes,
So-
absolutely.
Changes the runoff.
Yes,
It changes the runoff a little bit, I would imagine.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes,
All right,
yes, we
thanks.
enforce that.
You're all over it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have something totally off the subject? Want to bug them about? Thank you.
Gotta use them when you got them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Approval to submit cardiac devices grant application and acceptance.
Happy belated birthday, Chief.
Oh, thank you.
Good morning, Chief.
Good morning.
You're older?
A little bit.
Older than who?
Good news is I'm still employed. I don't have to go on Medicare yet. So leave it at that. Annually, the Maryland Institute for Emergency Medical Services Systems, or MIMS, offers the opportunity to apply for matching grants for the purchase of automatic external defibrillators and cardiac monitor defibrillators. As an eligible applicant, Carroll County Department of Fire and EMS is requesting 2 LifePak 35 cardiac monitors to be used as frontline EMS equipment on ambulances in the county. These LifePak 35s will replace current LifePak 15s, which are cardiac monitors, which are out of date and now unserviceable, with the most out-of-date units being replaced first. The grant requires a dollar-for-dollar match, and the match is budgeted in the current fiscal year budget.
Motion to approve the submission of the FY25 cardiac devices grant application and accept the award.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Now, Mr. Burke's going to talk about our ethics.
Lawyer talking about ethics. Go ahead.
Say it now. Get it
Go ahead. All right.
out. You had your chance, too late.
Yep.
Each October, I have to certify to the State Ethics Commission that our local ordinance mirrors the provisions of the state law with regard to conflicts of interest. Every couple years, the state will amend the state ethics ordinance to address some evil or some incident or some transgression committed by one of their people, and it immediately is imposed upon local governments as well. So you have to amend your local ordinance to reflect those amendments. In 2021, there were some amendments that were adopted that we need to incorporate now into our code. I'm not going to use the slides, but they're in your book. First one, it concerns the use of confidential information. And this one actually adds some flexibility to the current code. Currently, you can't use, an employer or a official can't use any confidential information or disclose it to anybody that was not available to the general public that you use by virtue of your position. So if you learn something by virtue of your position that nobody else knows, you can't use that to benefit yourself or another. The new code, I guess, to address like a whistleblower situation, gives you some flexibility, and it says that other than in the discharge of your official duties, you can't disclose or use confidential information not available to the public for the benefit of you or another person. Now, as I said, that's sort of a whistleblower provision, I think. Let's say a commissioner finds out there's a bid rigging going on or something, and they want to notify either the public or the disappointed bidder, hey, there's something wrong going on here. Technically, that would violate your current ordinance provision because you'd be disclosing confidential information to the benefit of another. But under the new code, that would clearly be, it's in the discharge of your official duties to say, there's bid rigging going on, we need to stop this. So that's one proposed revision. The second one merely provides that if you're when you're doing these financial disclosure statements, if you're required to disclose the name of a business, that you disclose the names of any other names or trades that you're doing business as. So if you're Kyler Enterprises, you need, and you have a couple other names, Kyler International or Kyler Amalgamated, you have to disclose all those names in your financial disclosure statement.
Kyler International Amalgamated.
The next is I'll call it the very curious MACO MML provision. As I said, these revisions to your local codes are generally generated when there's a state law change to address some problem that the state encountered. And so now we're required to adopt a provision that says you have to report any gifts in excess of $20 or a series of gifts totaling $100 received during the reporting period from, quote, any entity acting on behalf of an association that is engaged only in representing counties or municipal corporations. So obviously that's MML or MACO. Again, nobody has been able to determine the genesis of that provision, why we need that, why the state needed it. MACO certainly doesn't know why. I believe they were able to get the language revised in 2021 a bit, but that's a provision that now we have to have in our local code. So I don't know who's getting all this money from MACO. It's not me, probably not you, but we need to report it if we're getting it now. So finally, it's a protection for complainants is strengthened in in the state law, and we need to strengthen ours as well. Currently, an official can't retaliate against an individual for participating in an ethics investigation. Now, the state law was amended, and our code needs to be amended to provide that an official or an employee cannot retaliate against an individual for reporting or participating in an ethics investigation. To address a situation where an official says, "All right, Burke, get rid of your employee because he really jammed us up in its ethics provision." So it just says an official or employee may not retaliate. So those are the 4 provisions we need to incorporate into our code. And I'm here to ask if you have any questions, number 1, or 2, if you would like to proceed to public hearing on these and actually make them a part of our ethics code in a couple weeks or so.
Are the slides of this presentation available to the public?
Yes.
Where?
Well, I'll put them on the website.
And
They'll be made available to the public.
is there a time frame we have to comply with this?
Technically October 1st, but these deadlines are really terms of art in some situations.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Motion to approve moving to a public hearing for proposed revisions to Chapter 34 Ethics.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And I say that because we had to send these down to the state ethics. They notified us. We had to send them our proposed revisions to the council for the state ethics commission. She then had to present them to the state ethics commission. So the deadline of October 1st was not going to be met because of other circumstances. So
Yeah, gotcha. Thank you.
and I can report to her on October 1st that we're scheduling a public hearing soon on them. So we'll be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, draft language to submit 3 legislative initiatives to the Carroll County's delegation.
Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Want to tee this up for us, Tim?
Or I can if you want. So each year, our Carroll County delegation goes to Annapolis in January and works with the General Assembly to do the state's business. Part of that business involves the county, your creation of the state, and when you want certain legislation enacted, that has to go through the General Assembly process. So each year we ask staff and the commissioners if they're interested in making any legislative requests to your delegation partners. And this year we have 2 from staff and 1 from a commissioner. We'll present them now, and if you're interested in moving them forward, we will present them to the delegation at their public hearing, which I think at least is tentatively scheduled for November 21st. And then it's up to them whether they take it up and move it forward through the General Assembly process. So that's sort of the long and short of it. So we have a procurement issue with, a permits and collections issue with Ms. Jenny Hobbs, and a human resources issue with Ms. Christy Bixler. Something for Commissioner Gary.
Yeah, so,
So do you
Yeah.
want them to start?
yeah, sure.
Okay, or it's up to you.
You're first. Go ahead. Good morning. I was up here last year with the same topic of requesting your support to reserve the authority to withhold permits for unpaid personal property taxes. As you know, it didn't go completely through, so we're asking that we try to put this through again. Just to give a recap on this, it would be for personal property, which includes furniture, fixtures, office, and industrial equipment. Businesses get charged personal property tax from the county based on an annual report that they file with the state. Right now, we do not have a way in the county to enforce this other than sending somebody out, like capturing all this personal property, which would be more than so we are finding that businesses that do come and get permits are still able to continue doing the work in the county, even though they have unpaid property taxes that are due to us for the personal property. So we request your support in putting this back through to the state to see if we can withhold or hold permits until those taxes get paid.
And in the letter to them, can you say unpaid personal property taxes, comma, which include kind of the description you gave, maybe more brief, because I think that confusion might have let this slip through the cracks last year. And I think, I'm sure everybody knows exactly what you're saying, but it doesn't help to clarify.
Sure.
Any other
Doesn't hurt to clarify. You said doesn't help to clarify.
It probably doesn't.
Maybe it was a Freudian slip.
I was making sure I heard that correctly.
And you're a writer and a reader. When you come to a comma like that, do you keep reading or do you stop?
You stop at periods. You
Oh,
pause.
okay,
You
gotcha.
pause.
So you would read it,
I would
okay. Okay. So maybe it would help. Any other discussions on the first item?
Okay, I am here on the second item, which is a request to expand the authority of the county to conduct background checks to cover all categories of new employees after an established effective date, and then for any current employee after that effective date, any employee that would change positions, transfer, anything like that from one department to another. I believe this went through to the state for consideration back in 2020. There were some changes made to the current legislation which we follow, which is that, 2022. And there were some revisions made. So we currently do criminal background checks on anybody who is performing work that includes inspections, approval or denial of a permit, a license, or any other grant of authority, works in the offices of the county commissioners, the sheriff, the state's attorney, circuit court, or county attorney, is collecting or handling money, or is responsible for the care or supervision of a minor. Also, we do fire EMS, 911, human resources, IT, because we do have access to certain systems that require that background check. Right now, we do approximately 2/3 of our positions we do criminal background checks for. So that leaves 1/3 of positions that we're not doing criminal background checks for. Reason why would we want to do criminal background checks for everyone? One of the reasons is obviously it eliminates treating one group differently than the other group of employees. It ensures workplace and public safety, protects public dollars, enhances applicant quality and reliability, and then obviously our reputation of being an employer that checks into those things. What happens when we get a report back that someone has a criminal record? We consider the job, so we only look at convictions that are directly related to the job and haven't been expunged. So obviously, if we have someone for Jenny's collections department and they've had bankruptcy or something, criminal convictions would be, some sort of fraud or something like that. In the past 2 years, we would reconsider them for employment. We consider the crime and the nature of the crime and the recency of the crime. And then we consider what rehabilitation has occurred. So any evidence that the applicant has provided for their rehabilitation. We call each individual that we receive a criminal background check on, allow them to give us their side of the story, compare that with the criminal record, and then make a determination based on those factors. Criminal background checks are $31.25 each. So there is a cost implication, but for only 1/3 of our employees, it is not significant. I wouldn't expect that to be any more than $5,000 a year in additional costs.
Who pays for those?
We do pay for them, yep. And I just want to be clear that our intent is to do this for future hires and anybody that transfers. So I'm not going to run through the building and do criminal background checks on everybody. It would just be future hires and anybody who transfers or moves positions.
So
But
Tim is safe?
Tim's safe for now.
Do you have any idea why the legislators are reluctant about this?
I don't. I asked Roberta and Tim if they had any recollection of what the background was. Maryland did ban the box in 2020, which meant that we could not ask on applications anymore about criminal records. We could only ask after their first interview. So I'm not sure if it was just, something that came naturally after that. I did check with other counties throughout Maryland, and most of them do criminal background checks on all of their position
everyone,
hires. Mhm.
And then my other concern always with it is how subjective do you evaluate it? If I worked for one of you, which you probably wouldn't hire me, and I shoplifted comic books last week, does that mean I can't work?
Depends on the job and what we're hiring you to do. We've had situations come up where individuals have had criminal history that might have been 26 years ago, 25, 26 years ago. And, people can change. I consider their age, what age were they at? Were they, out goofing around at 18, or was this something that occurred recently? Those types of things. So we look at them all on an individual case-by-case basis and make the determination then.
How can a potential employee appeal that, or have we had anyone take legal action?
We have not, that I'm aware of, not since I've been here the 2 years. Like I said, we do have an interactive process with the applicant. So we'll call them and say, this came back on your criminal record, and then we get the story of what happened. So we take that into consideration, what they've told us, and, like I said, the rehabilitation, if they, had to go through anything to come back, or have it expunged, anything like that, we take that all into consideration, but I've not had an appeal.
Can you also put a frequently asked questions on your website for future applicants? The U.S. government does it for applications.
Yep.
If you do drugs, don't bother applying for at least a year until it's out of your system type. And that's a very frequent one with certain U.S. government agencies.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but people would know, hey, I'm going to go through this. They're going to see it, know that they're going to see it, and either apply or
It's your
don't
choice.
apply.
Yep.
So.
You can certainly do that.
So this would only cover new hires or anyone switching positions?
Yep.
Just out of curiosity, I don't know if you can answer this in total, or maybe Mr. Burke might want to weigh in for a quick second. If we leave whatever percentage open, and I'm not suggesting we have to do, there are other employees that don't fall in those categories that haven't had a background check, does that leave us potentially open to any legal concerns or liability issues as county government?
No, I think you could rationally, you're focusing on money or the law or other aspects is rationally related to the performance of the individual's duties. So that if you have a problem in the past with I wouldn't say bankruptcy, but bribery or you were
Theft
disbarred
or
in a
something.
certain state for something, then I don't think that's unreasonable to factor that into an employment decision.
No, I was just curious if that would leave us into any issues potentially if we didn't do background checks on everybody, though, across
No,
the
I don't-
board.
I
Do you think we're good?
Employees differently.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, I was just curious, just wanted to check. Thanks.
That's all on that one.
And then do you
Okay.
want to talk about?
Number
that?
I
three.
did not bring my camouflage hat or my orange vest, so I'm going to have to defer to Commissioner Guerin on the third one.
So it's fair to say I'm the sponsor of this legislative initiative. I hope I'm not the only sponsor, but I guess I'm the only sponsor right now. So for people that aren't aware, there is Sunday hunting throughout deer season. Deer season is fairly short. It's only 4 months long. And there are Sundays that you can hunt, but you have to keep in mind that most people work from Monday through Friday, so that really only leaves them on Saturdays. There are 10 counties within the state that allow Sunday hunting throughout. And interestingly enough, they also allow hunting on wildlife management areas, which are actually owned by DNR. So that I find that point interesting. I'm not sure how they were able to do that. There are some cooperative wildlife management areas within the county that we own. So perhaps allowing people to hunt on Sundays there may not require legislative action. I have no idea, but there are two different flavors of public lands. I wanted to make that point clear. So it's also important to note that most of deer hunting season is archery. There are only 2 blocks of, and they're fairly short blocks for rifle hunting. And I'm not sure this even impacts a whole lot of Sundays for rifle, because I know there are a few of them where you can hunt on Sundays. So the impact on, if noise is a concern, are very minimal. Obviously there's an economic impact, if you will, for local processors, and we do have some very, very busy processors that are trying to grow their business here in Carroll County. But mostly, it just allows Carroll County residents more freedom and opportunity to hunt during what is a very short 4-month deer season. So for that reason, I wanted to forward this to the delegation. Full disclosure, I'm a hunter myself, both archery and rifle, and I can speak to the fact that you get a couple bad weather Saturdays in there, and you've got to work from Monday through Friday, and you really don't have a whole lot of opportunity to go out there. Anecdotally, and I think this is probably backed up by data, the deer population is going up in Maryland, and the number of deer being killed every year is going down because the number of hunters are going down. And I'm not going to sit up here and say that this would make the roads safer for anybody in Carroll County, but it is a problem. It is a problem. During rut, you've got a lot of deer running around, running through roads, so that's going to happen no matter who's hunting. Of course, deer get spooked, but during rut, they're all over the place, and that's when you really have to watch out. But we do have a deer problem. I went to the gym in Mount Airy yesterday, and there were 3 deer walking across the parking lot. I have never seen that before. Again, completely anecdotal, but I think this does speak a little bit to a potential safety issue as well, but I don't want to overstate that. So I hope the board will support my addition of this as a legislative initiative. I know there will be some technical details to work out and some things we probably need to confirm, but I would hope to have the board's support for adding this.
Couple questions. Number one, is this bullet point correctly worded? Currently, you can hunt on Sundays for 3.5 months? Is that correct?
That Sunday hunting, I think there are some, again, there's a chart online. I think there are some Sundays within that period that it is not allowed. But for a majority of the Sundays, yes, it is legally permitted. But you got to remember the archery season starts in early September, so I'm not sure what the timelines really are.
Yeah, and so I don't know if we can make the point, but we're not asking for, in other words, it may already be half the season. You know, we're asking for it to be extended. We're not asking like it's not allowed now.
Yes, it's fair to say that Sunday hunting is allowed for more than half the season, so to be honest.
We just want the rest.
Yes, Commissioner, that is correct.
And then the other thing, and I don't know how you word this for Annapolis, we're rural county. Worse than the deer on the road is the crops they destroy, and corn, beans, and the deer are getting worse and worse and worse. So this helps maintain the healthy herd, but I don't know if that, just like our Second Amendment rights, I'm not sure that means anything to somebody that's grew up in the city and has never seen a cornfield, but this has a number of good reasons
I think that's a very fair assessment, and one that I left out. Crop damage is a serious problem, particularly for a lot of pick-your-own establishments and a lot of nurseries and things like that. The damage goes on a year long. And, interestingly enough, as a side note, I mean, I do recall, although I don't know if I was old enough to buy alcohol at the time, but, it was a point in time where you couldn't buy alcohol on Sunday in Carroll County. So that was changed, and I think that was probably the right decision to make. So hopefully we can allow some Sunday hunting for a few extra days throughout the deer hunting season.
Well, I think it's a good idea, and I'm grateful that Commissioner Guerin brought it up. Do you want to make a motion?
Well, that's a good question. How do we, do we
have
just
to
make
do the-
one giant motion, I guess, on all three of these?
Unless you
And before,
forward all
and
three.
nobody wants to add a fourth item. We're happy with these three and getting this done, right?
Yep.
That's a good question. Yeah, okay, so
Hit it.
I will do the honors. I move that the Board of Carroll County Commissioners direct staff to draft language for 3 legislative initiatives to be submitted to Carroll's delegation for the FY fiscal year 26 legislative session.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion, comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the adoption of the county's purchasing policy.
I'm just gonna stay.
Well, hello again.
Do we want to tell Commissioner Guerin, our son's favorite commissioners?
Yeah, you just became our
son's
sons are the same age. You just became our son's favorite commissioner because they both hunt.
Oh. Well, I hope it.
Mine
some more-
actually wants to become a DNR
Is that
game
right?
warden, so.
I hope there's some extra venison in your freezer.
I was
as
sitting
a-
back there, I'm
as
like,
a result.
he just became my son's favorite commissioner.
Commissioner Guerin moves that the Board of County Commissioners will approve the resolution.
Well, that was easy. We're done. So, good morning again. We are here, Carrie and I are here to go over the proposed procurement policy. As you know, last year we had submitted to the state of Maryland, they approved the increase of the formal bid limit for Carroll County from $25,000 to $50,000. And we are required to do a resolution to approve, to adopt a new, or a replacement, I guess, purchasing policy that reflects this change. Along with that change, we did go through the purchasing policy and have several other recommendations to hopefully get your support on. This includes small purchases increased from $2,500 to $5,000. Right now, our small purchases say in the current policy that if you have $2,500, you have to get so many quotes and, 3 quotes? I think it is 2 quotes for $2,500 or more. We would like to see that increased with the cost of living, cost of everything now. $5,000 is reasonable. It also reflects the changes in the state policy because that's what the state of Maryland has in theirs. Purchases that would be over $5,000 up to the legal bid limit would require responsive quotes or acceptable offers from at least 2 vendors at that point. There is also Article 7, which is additional fees for appeals, which are outlined in the procurement policy. Article 9 is a reference to non-discrimination and equal opportunity policies. This is a requirement of the federal and state grants that we put that reference in there. We've also removed the reference to Bureau Chief of Purchasing and replaced all of that with Procurement Officer, as that name had changed several years ago for Carrie's position. These changes are consistent with the state of Maryland office. We reviewed theirs, we compared, and other jurisdictions within the state of Maryland.
Any questions, comments, motion?
Motion to approve the resolution to adopt the county's purchasing policy dated September 26, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Now a discussion regarding Carroll Transit System.
Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right. So we are here for part 2 out of 3 for our deep dive on Carroll Transit System, CTS. As we recall, we were here on August 22nd. We discussed all the services Carroll County government provides and a bit about the ridership also out in the community. So today's agenda will cover all the funding associated with those services. We'll start with the Veteran Shuttle. It's a pretty easy, low-hanging fruit. Hopefully there's no questions there, but then we're going to kind of get into the weeds a little bit on some of the operating budgets and where the funding sources are. So with that, I'll hand it over to Stacy.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Morning.
So like Brian said, I'm not focusing on veteran transit today, but I did want to give you just a little bit of the budget information for that. It's only increasing slightly from FY24 just due to rising fuel and maintenance costs. Our buses that we run this service with are 100% county-owned and maintained. We will also be requesting one replacement minivan in FY26. The minivans are 12 years old in this service, so it's time to start getting on a replacement schedule for those. Any questions on veterans before I focus on public transit? Okay. We're going to talk about both operating and capital budgets for public transit, so I wanted to start with what each includes. Our operating budget includes the operations contract with Ride With Us, county staff salary, fuel, dispatch software licensing fees, bus lettering and training. And our capital budget includes the buses, the purchase of, the maintenance of, and the maintenance of the transit building. Public transit is funded with a mix of FTA and MTA grants and local funding. The FTA funding includes all COVID funds, which expire FY26, our annual rural grant, along with our capital grants. As a reminder, due to the 2020 census, we lost our urbanized zone area, according to FTA, and therefore lost urban funding, which until FY25 had been our main source of operating grant funds. MTA funding includes some matching funds to our FTA grants, along with a state-funded program, the Statewide Specialized Transportation Assistance Program, or shortened to STAP. That has an annual increase built into legislation, so that will slowly increase going forward. The change with MTA is their new allocation method. So with this method, our funding will most likely change annually, but it could also be affected by other systems around the state. So if another jurisdiction doubles their ridership, adds more routes, and their increase to their grants could decrease ours. And vice versa, if we grow, we could affect other people in the state too. So while we're getting a larger grant in FY25, it's hard to predict what future years are going to be with this new allocation method since it's the first year that it's really been in place.
So basically, there's the potential that every year this is going to change in some direction or another.
Yes. I want to say that I don't anticipate big change annually, but until we have a couple years of seeing how this goes, I honestly have no idea.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll just note that might be a good conversation tonight with the group from MDOT here for the CTP.
Our local funds include the fare revenues, which fluctuate annually based on ridership. As ridership continues to increase, so will the fares. The required match to the grant, which is important to note that if we don't have the required match, we don't receive the funding. And then local overmatch, which is county funding over and above the required match. It essentially makes up the difference in the budget that isn't covered by grants or fares. So the budget for FY25 is just over $500,000 more than it was in FY18. That's only a 20% increase over the last 7 years. You can see the dip in costs due to COVID in 20 and 21. Because our contract is based on revenue hours, so with less buses running, we spent less on the contract. You can also see the impact that the COVID funds have had on this budget. The county received a total of $5,897,876 in COVID funding. The COVID funds are in red on this chart, and they have reduced, if not eliminated, the use of county funds since 2020. Our annual funding from FTA, MTA is in gray. And other than in 21 and 22, that has remained pretty consistent. Again, FY25, we will be receiving a little more grant funding. The yellow is the required county match to those grant dollars, which again is also increasing in 25. The light blue is the county overmatch. which you can see we have not needed since '21, but we will again in '26. And the dark blue is the fare revenue, which before COVID was more than it is now since ridership was higher prior to COVID. A few more things to point out. We did not accept any of our normal annual funding in FY '22, so we did not use any county funding that year. It was all COVID. And again, we've used it since '22 to eliminate overmatch. We still have about $800,000 in CARES COVID money to use this year and next year, but it will be spent by the end of FY '26. The FY '26 column is absolutely a estimate. It's based on a 15% increase to the contract. Since we will be going out to bid in the next couple months, it is just an estimate to give us an idea what it might look like going forward, to include that overmatch since the COVID money will be spent.
Do you have an estimate for FY '27?
I do not, but I know budget does.
Okay, I mean, we're looking at 1 year out, so I would expect, you know, if we're going for a bid, that they're gonna be looking at the out years. Do you have something to say? Yeah.
A little shorter than this. So what's in our plan right now is 15% is built in as the increase for FY '26. That's part of why you see that as part of what Stacy just presented. And then going forward, we were anticipating about a 5% increase annually in the contract amount, just the contract piece. So that's what we're assuming, and that's based on the current contract. So again, once we have that new contract and a new bid, then we'll be able to make those changes going forward.
And
But
that's-
right now, we're
yeah.
anticipating 5%.
That's gonna happen in the next few months?
To go out to bid, yes.
They go out to bid.
So the new contract would start in FY '26.
Correct.
So how long's the
July.
contract?
The current contract is structured at, we had a 3-year and then 2 1-year options, which
Okay.
I would anticipate would
And,
be what
and
we would
it's
do
up
next.
being rebid, and last time you only had one bidder.
Correct.
So who knows, but odds are. And, well, maybe, everybody, looking at pre-COVID, the revenue for fares was much higher. Is that due to number of riders? Because you've raised fees since then, or you haven't? You haven't raised any fees since
We
then?
haven't raised fees, I had this in front of me last time, 2011?
Okay.
That's sticking in my head, don't hold me to that, though.
Now, the county match, I would be curious to see in 18, 19, and the proposed 26, what's the dollars for the county match? And I think we'll see it further on in here for last year, this year, some more details, but I'm curious what it was before COVID, because there were some positives out of COVID, and some of it was money, but we need to remember what it cost us before that, too.
So it was very
it-
similar.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have those figures today, but if somebody can email
I was
us,
gonna say, not right with us, but we can get
don't-
those for you.
oh, man.
They were very
Have
similar.
a couple years, but not those particular ones.
They have not changed much. So, looking at FY '24 actuals on this sheet, they were very similar in 18 and 19,
Yes.
grant-wise.
Yeah, and
But I can send them.
ridership's growing since COVID.
It's growing, but it's not
but
back to where it was.
Not quickly.
Correct.
The contract that you're on right now, you said 3 + 1 + 1.
Mhm.
Currently, you're at 3 + 1? Or
We are in the last option year.
you're in the last option year, so we are now working afresh?
We will, yes.
You will.
This is the last year of basically a 5-year contract.
Yes.
So we'll issue a request for proposals here in the late '24, early '25, and get those proposals in the spring, and then award late spring.
To be effective 1 July
Yes.
25.
Correct.
Okay.
And I see some of this in the advisory meetings, and I think I asked in the last one, could all the commissioners get copies of all the paperwork that I get for the meeting? But in ridership, and if this, again, if you have to email us some stuff later, we have, my concern with this, we have some riders that wouldn't get to the doctor, wouldn't get to the senior center, wouldn't get places without this. But we also have some riders that take this to work.
Yes.
And do you have any idea the percentages of those? And have we lost people that take it to work because of COVID? I mean, I got to think the people going to the senior center, their doctors, unless they all of a sudden got their license back or a car, they still need it. But some of the others, it's convenient, but not a necessity.
So I don't
Am
know
I
off the
right?
top of my head to answer that officially. But I can get the breakdown of where people are going for our demand response service. I can give you how many people are getting on and off at the senior centers for Trailblazer, but I can't officially tell you that's where they were going. But for demand response, I can give you that breakdown. The loss in ridership since COVID has, a lot of moving parts, but a big part of that was our DDA community also changing how they were structuring their day programs. So we aren't taking as many people to them as we used to. So as people are coming back and using the service, that hasn't really returned yet.
Now, you mentioned the loss of the urban funding. Is there any possibility, which I guess there's always a possibility, but is there any possibility we'll get that back, or we think that's pretty much done?
With a new census,
Okay.
If we
Potentially.
Did, it would be 10 years.
Yeah. The other thing, obviously, we're talking about fair revenue, which was 431,000 in FY24. It's projected at 400,000, which it's been for FY25 and 26. We're down roughly 31,000, 32,000. Have we considered any other options? And obviously, with fares not being increased in 13 years, that's tricky given the individuals that use this service. Have we considered maybe looking at these vehicles and looking to either, I'd say either wrap the vehicles or in some ways adjust the logos? Because one thing that might be a thought, and I've seen this on some other transit vehicles that are not ours, is they will have advertising for other businesses or whatever. Could we look at that as maybe revenue on this entire fleet of vehicles to maybe offset that 30-some thousand or more?
we have advertising on some of our vehicles.
Do we? Okay, 'cause I know I
Not a
haven't
lot
seen-
of them. We
okay.
just don't have a lot of interest in
Okay.
advertising on them, but that is a possibility, yes. We have that available.
And then we're looking at projected FY26, just for the public if they can't see it on the screen. We're looking at roughly almost $1 million that the county would have to put in for the county overmatch where we haven't the last 2 years. So that would be a significant increase for the budget
And we haven't because of COVID.
because of COVID,
Correct.
yes, which that'll flip-flop from the COVID money,
Do you know
yes.
how much our overmatch was? This is prior to the COVID money. Yeah.
It was in line with that. Based on my bar chart, again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think 19 was probably more in overmatch than what we're expecting in 26. But it was around that $1 million. That does stick in my head. That is what we put into it.
I just want to add one thing. So just remember that as part of our 6-year operating plan, we had anticipated that FY26, the CARES funding would start to go away. We actually had some questions and discussed that a little in the spring as well. So that is something we have anticipated and something that is built into the 6-year operating plan for that COVID funding to go away and the county dollars to be reinstated and restored. So.
And while we've got you, Heidi, real quick, not to put you totally on the spot, but I think I'm correct. When we had looked at the numbers at the end of budget, it was what, roughly, going into this year, it's what, 5 million is the deficit, I believe. Does that sound roughly correct?
For FY26.
For
Right, that-
FY26?
That was my understanding of it as well, that it was about 5 million, a little more.
My recollection.
That's why I come prepared. 5.2.
5.2, okay, thank you.
You could have been more accurate there.
She forgot the quarter,
no
but she's
pennies.
dead on. Thank you, Heidi.
All right.
So just a little bit more of the breakdown on the budget based on the grants, which as your next item, I'm hoping that you will accept. So the increase to the FY25 budget is about $130,000 more than was spent in FY24. Increase to the contract based on ridership, fuel costs, increase in some county expenses, salaries, bus wraps, since we're anticipating to receive a couple years' worth of buses. But again, the big change here is the funding. So the first time in many years that our annual grant funding has changed, and it's a big change. Due to the MTA formula and the loss of our urban funding, we're receiving more grant funds, but our match is significantly higher. Unfortunately, with this pot of funding, MTA is only putting in the same amount of money that they put against our grant last year. So while we're getting more from MTA is only putting in the $40,000, and we have to make up the difference in that match funding. So our required match is going from $300,000 to $824,000. But the good news is we still have enough COVID funding to cover the remainder of the budget without needing any additional county overmatch in FY25. But like I said, 26, the county overmatch will return. Any more questions on operating?
I mean, maybe this is a question for a little bit later in the presentation when you talk about the transit assets and dispatch software and things. But has any consideration been given to the routes that are run, the hours that the shuttle or the buses are operated? I was, I took a ride on one of these a couple of months or several months ago. And if it had not been for myself and 3 of my fellow passengers who were also on that bus specifically to get a feel for that experience, there was no one else on that bus. It was just running back and forth from Tawnytown to the center across the street in Westminster. And that is literally just burning money that we do not have. And so I'm wondering if there has been some kind of reconsideration of how those buses are running, when they're running, and to Commissioner Kyler's point about, well, who is it that we're serving with these buses and when?
So the Tawnytown bus, I actually can tell you, is mainly employment. So I don't know what time you were on the bus, but
10, was it 10?
9 or 10.
9, 10.
So I would say the first run for Tawnytown into Westminster is going to have more people on it because they're trying to get to work. And then the last one at the end of the day. Tawnytown in the middle of the day is less used than our other routes. And we look at our routes annually for stop usage and what time of day things are going places. There just hasn't been any appetite to make big changes, so we haven't. But we do look at them, we do monitor them, and typically we come to you with stop changes when they need to happen. If there's nobody using a stop, we will take it off of a route and look at if we need to add anything additional.
Can you touch on the plan that?
So the TDP, Transportation Development Plan, which I will talk about in the capital budget, conveniently next, is a 5-year plan required by our grant, and has to happen every 5 years, but it's a good way to look at those kind of things. The consultant will come in and talk to the Transit Advisory Council, and we'll come and have presentations to you guys to see, where you want transit to go, and then they can do some analysis on what things would do to the system and who would be affected and things like that.
So that particular discussion will be coming up
Whenever that process starts. So we have the funding for FY25 in our grant. The last time that we had a TDP done, we had the funding in that year, but it didn't get done until the following year. So I haven't heard where we are on their schedule yet to know when that's coming.
Okay,
Should be in the next year, I would
Gotcha.
think.
I'm just kind of curious about that because I know with this potential for contract change coming up, I would certainly want to have a lot of these things figured out, or at least have a basis for moving forward from these. So,
Yes, understood.
thank you.
Yeah.
Is that state driven?
The TDP?
Yeah.
I think it might be federally driven.
So I asked who drives the bus on the TDP, so it's either state or federal.
I think it's federal. Oh, my.
That was pretty good. I got it.
Yeah. Since FTA gives us funding for it, I'm going to say it's federally driven.
Great, thank you.
More about the capital budget. So we're receiving $150,000 to maintain the buses, just over $300,000 to purchase 3 replacement buses, and then the $100,000 for the development plan. The current match percentage for our grant, or for our capital grants, is 80% federal, 10% state, and 10% local. It is important to note, though, that in FY26, the state match will be dropping to 5%, so we'll have to make up that additional 5 going forward.
Which equates to what?
15%.
Which
What do you
equates to 15?
We'll
No,
have to make up 15%.
which equates to how much dollars?
Oh, I think over the next couple of years, if I remember correctly, and Heidi can correct me if I'm wrong, over the next couple of years, the county will have to kick in a couple $1 million ultimately for the transit system. I think over 3 at some point, if I'm correct, in the coming years, not this year, but in the next couple of years. The amount of money we have to put into the transit system is going to increase pretty exponentially.
Well, go back to the last slide.
That would be the operating budget.
Yeah, so because the COVID funding is going away, you have to then start funding again the county, not only the county match, but the county overmatch. So you see in that last column at the bottom half, the county match is $824,000 and the county overmatch is $900,000. So yes, the better part of $2 million from the county dollars alone. The big difference there is not the county overmatch. We've been able to save county overmatch over the last 2-3 years because of the red COVID money, but I guess the county match too, to some, at least in 22. But the big difference, next slide, is that 824,000. If you look at 24, it was 305. Now it's 800, and the reason is the change in the state funding.
Right, but it's a change for us. It's still a change for us, and we have limited.
But it's about a $500,000 change. I mean, it's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the change is about 500,000 from what we had pre-COVID. The numbers are pretty much the same as they are today. But because of the state's change in their funding, we have about an additional $500,000 that we have to come up with.
The bottom
Not
line is,
2 or 3 million. Does that make sense? We just got to save money during the COVID years.
Right, but
right. If we were to maintain the service we're maintaining today, next year, we will have to increase our operational budget to meet those needs
By about 500,000.
by about 500,000. That's really what we're talking about, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and that's a
And
result.
that's only for FY26. We haven't looked at 27, 28.
Right, because this change
Unless
in the
it's
way
at
the state
5%.
is doing their assessment, and it is just implemented, now, we don't know what the future looks like on the state's contribution to the transit system for us or any other jurisdiction in the state that uses MTA funding.
And that's why I'd like to see 18 and 19 pre-COVID, what we were paying, because, like I say, we got a false sense of security with COVID money in many budgets.
Right. So what I would suggest we do is just do 3 or 4 more columns of the FY, 24 and before actuals, and then you can see across the line.
And the capital budget, we're talking 25 grand or something increasing.
Yeah.
Not, which is still 25 grand, but not.
And from a budget perspective, when we talk about total county dollars going into the transit program, we do include both the operating portion that Stacy just spoke to, as well as the capital budget portion she's discussing now. So we do look at both of those pieces as part of the overall county match that goes to that program.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a false sense of security.
Yeah.
That we had for years.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so continuing with capital. Bus prices obviously have increased about $40,000 since 2018 for the same kind of buses that we've been buying. But the important thing here to note is the maintenance. Our maintenance costs are increasing at a pretty substantial rate due to a couple factors. One being the cost of parts since COVID, but the bigger factor is the age of our fleet. The older the fleet gets, the more money we have to put into the buses to keep them running safely.
So you get federal money, state money to buy buses, but we own them.
We own them.
They're our asset 100%.
They are. Yeah, and the entire fleet is ours. So our fleet is 38 vehicles, federally funded, county assets. None of them are contractor assets, if that is helpful. And we purchase all of our buses through state contracts. So we go through state procurement for all the vehicles that we buy. FTA sets the useful life of the buses that we have at 6 years or 200,000 miles. 8 of our buses are 2015s or older, all of which are said to be replaced by buses that are already on order but have not yet been delivered. 15 of them are 2017s. We received all 15 at one time. There were a couple years that we didn't receive any buses, so we got them all in one big lump sum. And it's causing maintenance costs to go up because they're all starting to get more expensive. We need engines replaced, we need transmissions replaced. The state has been on a schedule to replace 3 a year for us, and I don't expect that to change. That's been the case for the last 6 years that I've been here. But that would mean that it'll take us at least another 5 years just to get through these 2017s. Not to mention the fact that we currently have 6 on order, plus another 3 that I'm hoping that you guys will approve the grant for in your next item, that could all come within the next 12 months. So that would be another set of 9 buses in 6 to 10 years that will start having these same issues again. Luckily, our Bureau of Fleet Management services these vehicles, and they do an excellent job of keeping them up and running on the road, but there's only so much that they can do when multiple vehicles need major repairs all at one time.
Bear with me a second, Brian. What are your numbers at Fleet Management?
Excuse me?
What are your numbers at Fleet Management currently?
Numbers of what?
Vehicles?
People. No, people.
People, Mr. Oliver will be up here in a little bit. I believe we're staffed at 22 or 24.
Timing read.
We just got 2 new positions last,
Yes, sir. So the Bureau of Fleet Management has 14 mechanics.
14 mechanics, or there's 14 required, 14 on hand?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Our transit building is also a county asset. It was built in 2010 with 100% federal funding and is maintained by facilities. But another important note here with transit assets is that even $1 of federal funding towards an asset makes it a public transit asset. So it can only be used for this service once we put any federal funding into it. Okay. Just some future considerations that could be coming in the near to distant future. We were talking about dispatch software briefly earlier. It's something that comes up often. What we have, works and it does what it's supposed to do. But every time that we have a survey or a public forum, we're usually asked for a user app and real-time data so people can see where their buses are. Right now, we don't have any of those things. So we're always looking at options for dispatch software. Zero-emission buses have been proposed in state legislation for 24 and 25. They haven't been approved, but it's probably coming at some point. MTA did do a statewide study in 2023 on the infrastructure needed for each operation to go to zero emissions. As of then, the estimate for Carroll County exceeded $16 million for infrastructure and buses needed to run our service the way that it is run now. In conjunction with zero emissions, there has been some discussion about solar panels out at that site, which would obviously help hopefully offset costs of charging any buses. And then last but not least, as we've requested in the CIP a couple times, the expansion of the transit building. As the system grows, it continues to run out of space. It was quickly built. We had a very short turnaround time to use the funding that was used to build the building. An expansion would certainly allow for some needed changes as we move forward, depending on what the service looks like.
Isn't the major consideration running public transportation the way it is today? I mean, it's where we're going to be going into another contract for FY26 with potential 5-year, 3-1-1, whatever it may be. And then, like Commissioner Vigliotti shared about the Tawnytown route, it's, are we servicing the Carroll County community with public transportation correctly? And will it be done correctly FY '26 through FY '30, '35, you know, in the master plan? I mean, that's the future consideration. A lot of these are tasks that need to occur to make that happen, but that's, I mean, you know, we are in a budget deficit of $5.2 million operationally going into FY '26. So, you know, where is that money going to continue to service our public transportation the way it is today? Should it, or should we change? I mean, I'm not saying one way or the other, but I'm saying that's the consideration that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and that's the third presentation.
That's the third presentation.
That's an excellent segue, Commissioner.
Just wait, it's coming.
I'm looking forward to that.
So felt we needed to get a good base of understanding. So last time we talked about what the system is and the people it serves. This time the funding, and then the next time of, you know, here it is today. What do you want it to look like in the future, so that when we do issue the RFP, it's issuing what the board wants it to be.
And not the future, but still the past. Two questions. One, and maybe that would be an email versus time spent today, but you guys do ridership surveys. You guys have eliminated routes, added routes, modified routes. They haven't just been all fixed, and you do analyze them pretty much. And if you could touch on that, and then maybe somebody in the audience now looking at her cell phone could tell us
In the brown.
what, yes.
It's so
This may not be mandatory, but it drastically affects some other services we give the Carroll County, because that's how they get there.
Absolutely.
So if you could each touch on that, I'd appreciate briefly, and then we can look at how we want to do it in the future. So
We have made changes to our Trailblazer routes. It's usually an annual thing that we make changes. We haven't in the last year or two because we added some new stops and we wanted to see how they would go before we just decided to remove them. We don't have any to recommend for you this year, but we probably will next year as far as stops go. What was the rest of that question?
well, the
That's the
ridership
question.
surveys and how many
Ridership survey, yes.
and
We are actually going to put out the same ridership survey that we did last year in October. So that should be up on the website here in the next week or two.
And you have added and developed a good website.
Oh, thank you. We have made some changes to it to hopefully make it less awful, but we're getting there.
Oh, come on.
Now, how many do they transport to your other services? And if they go away, can you just like take them in your car, or what would you do?
much bigger vehicle.
So to answer the last part of that, no, I would not take them in my personal vehicle, and I hope our risk manager is listening. But, you know, we have, and actually I did have it pulled up, Stacy, from your last presentation with the data on how many are transported to some of the services that are provided, whether it's senior center services, whether it's the ridership with our senior inclusion program, with our developmental disability partners, and the provision of services that they have where folks are transporting with public transportation. But our folks are using the on-demand service as well as the regular routes, right? To access their services and also their medical appointments. For some of these folks, they need that accessible lift that is provided by this public transportation service. If that was not available, they would not have any other way to get there, because the cost to privately hire that type of transportation is more than these folks, most of them low income, not most, but many of them are lower income, could afford, especially on the frequency that they need to be going to appointments. That's the other piece of it. So it becomes very cost prohibitive for them to access the services that they do with the support of public transportation for our community. And I think I just want to say again, it's definitely a benefit to our older adults, our people with disabilities, and you don't know until you get to that age. In some ways you think, I will never use public transportation. I don't need it. It's not something I'll ever need to access. But as people age, different things happen, especially with mobility. And I see it time and time again where people call in and say, I never thought I'd have to access this. How can I do this? And so that's where we help to connect them. And we work very closely with Stacy and her team to really help them access that and see what the needs are. And if we're not meeting that need, how do we redevelop? And so I know those conversations happen time and time again. And then we also have and just to plug again, at the Bureau of Aging and Disabilities, we also provide for older adults and people with disabilities discounted tickets that they can purchase through the Bureau of Aging and Disabilities to access bus and transportation services.
Quick question for you on those discounted tickets. Are those for use only within this program then?
They can use them for CTS services for Carroll Transit. So
Okay.
they can use them for any transportation service that Carroll Transit offers.
I mean, not that this totally dovetails into this conversation, but I was having a conversation recently with a member of the community, probably in their late 70s, early 80s, and of course their challenge is they're not from Carroll County. Originally they lived in Baltimore County. So their challenge is they want to get down to the metro so they can then go visit family and friends. And the numbers I've been told by them, whether it be a taxi service or other option, is just shocking. I mean, we're talking $100, $150 for one trip.
Especially if they need a specialized vehicle.
Yes.
Right. Correct.
So, okay, I appreciate it.
I would like to add that the reason that we don't go to the metro is because there is a resolution that Carroll Transit does not go outside of the county.
Adopted by a prior board.
And last question, I promise. I think you call them subscribers, but you have people that line this up ahead of time.
We do.
Do you have like walk-ins too?
Yes. Yep. We still take same-day reservations. If it's available, you can call the same day, and if we can come get you, we will.
Better to call ahead, though.
Yes.
Thank you. We greatly appreciate all the questions. And, you know, as Roberta said, moving into the next presentation, you know, we're asking you to put your thinking caps on, come with ideas, come with thoughts. You know, Commissioner Gordon talked about going outside the county. We had a lot of conversations about Mount Airy. You know, that Frederick line's very close and what kind of services we can provide there. So, you know, we're gonna get with budget. We're gonna look at a bunch of options. We're gonna have our notebooks with us and hopefully have some answers and can run through some scenarios with you all.
I'm very interested in the veteran shuttle and options. I'll be talking with Secretary as well about that, along with others, because from day one, I've always felt that we should expand the services to make it available for veterans outside the county, going from here to there, whether it be going to Green Street, you're going through Baltimore County or Howard County. Let's make it available for them and let them put money into the coffers as well for us, you know, and figure that out and make this into an actual hub of excellence for our veterans. And same thing going to Martinsburg. We crossed 2-3 counties, you know, going to Martinsburg. And it'd be great to be able to pick up veterans, you know, in Frederick and Washington or Allegheny or Garrett, wherever they, you know, end up going through. But there needs to be these relationships. So, yeah, more to follow as I continue to have those conversations. But, Brian, you're absolutely right. Put on the thinking caps and, you know, it's always going to be no unless you know, if you never ask, you know. And so let's come up with some ways of doing things, you know, especially, like I said, on a $5.2 million deficit walking into FY26. So.
And we're a very rural county. There aren't too many 16-year-olds that don't get their license as soon as they're legally allowed, because You need transportation here. And then we're lucky in a way. We have friends like rural Oklahoma, and they shock me because you'll be with them and they'll go, let's ride over to Bill's house and talk with them. And it might be a 45-minute or an hour drive. And they're just like, yeah, that's what it takes to get around. So we're lucky we're not that rural, but people need this. It really concerns me. Any other comments, questions?
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks.
We're not done.
Okay, now the acceptance of award of the fiscal year annual transportation grants.
So I don't really have much more to add for this one. We already went through what the grants are going to look like. Just hoping that you will accept our FY25 grants so we can move forward with spending said money.
Motion to accept the FY25 Transportation Grant Awards.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Now, Carroll County Humane Society kennel replacement.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning. The Office of Procurement, in cooperation with the Bureau of Facilities, requests your approval to award a contract for the replacement of dog kennels to MWI Animal Health in the amount of $234,866.34. This cost will cover the general contractor expertise, work, labor, and materials for the scope of work listed. This amount is within the approved budget. The Bureau of Facilities solicited bids with 3 respondents, and it's on the chart below.
Morning, Commissioners. The current dog kennels are more than 30 years old and have reached the end of their life. The kennels are no longer able to be repaired and no longer meet the needs of the Animal Standard Care Act. New kennels were approved during the FY25 budget process. In-house staff will provide the removal of the old kennels as well to save funds. MWI Animal Health will be replacing all 38 dog kennels at the Humane Society with fiberglass reinforced panels, which is an RFP product, and stainless steel parts. These will improve both staff and animal safety, cleanliness of the facility, and noise reduction within the kennels themselves. So the dogs can't see each other and go crazy, and it's a lot contained, a little better environment for them.
Motion to award the contract to MWI Animal Health for replacement dog kennels in the amount of $234,866.34.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any questions or further discussion?
During the last budget cycle, we also provided funding for air conditioning replacement. I think that's already been completed, am I right?
The air conditioning has not. That's phase 2 of the project.
Okay.
Once this is in, we're currently working on that phase right now to get that up and running for springtime.
All right, okay, that makes sense. All right, thank
Correct. We wanted to get these kennels in because I know that was a priority for us with wintertime, fall time coming here. Temperatures are going to drop, so we wanted to put all our time and resources to get this bid out and get this rolling for the animal safeties.
And it would seem that you'd have to have these kennels in before you assess the AC requirements anyway, right? Being the
Absolutely.
project manager. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any more discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, mill pave and restripe the parking lot at Workforce Development.
All right. The Office of Procurement, in cooperation with the Bureau of Facilities, requests your approval to award a contract for milling, paving, and restriping of the parking lot at Workforce Development Building to GEMS Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $72,900. This purchase will be made via a term contract that was awarded to GEMS Contracting. This amount is approved in the fiscal year 25 budget.
So yeah, Commissioners, the roadway and the parking lot over here across the street at Workforce Development has started to degrade and is in need of replacement. The current age of the asphalt is roughly 30 years old, and we had made multiple repairs to that parking lot in the past, crack sealing, cutting areas out, remilling. GEMS Contracting will be milling and repaving approximately 4,000 square yards mill 2 inches, and overlay 2 inches.
Motion to approve the contract award for milling, paving, and restriping to Gems Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $72,900.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
Now, upfitting one vehicle.
Good morning.
Morning.
The Office of Procurement, in cooperation with the Bureau of Fleet Management and Warehouse Operations, request your approval to use first priority emergency vehicles to complete the upfitting of one Carroll County Department of Fire and EMS vehicle in the amount of $28,830.59. This includes all parts, labor, installation, and delivery. This purchase will be made via an HGAC contract that was competitively bid. This amount is within the approved fiscal year 25 budget.
Commissioners, I did want to share a few pictures. Last week, Commissioner Kyler had asked about the upfitting process for the sheriff vehicles, whether or not that includes interior components. It did, and it does as well for this unit today. As you can see, exterior graphics lights, sirens, lockable storage compartments, center console, communication equipment, docking station, and much more. I hope this provides a better visual to what all is encompassed into this request today.
Does it include the cappuccino maker? Almost looks like it should, right?
See it.
You see it right there?
Motion to approve the use of first priority emergency vehicles to complete the upfitting of one Carroll County Department of Fire and EMS vehicle in the amount of $28,830.59.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and just one question. Did the photos make you make the motion, or were you already sold?
The fact that you offered no objections made me want to make the motion.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucky item 13, pavement testing and rehabilitation.
Hello, gentlemen.
Morning.
Morning.
We're still morning,
Yep.
Good morning. The Office of Procurement, in cooperation with the Bureau of Engineering, request your approval to use the existing term contract with WSP USA Environment and Infrastructure Incorporated to evaluate and provide pavement testing and rehabilitation recommendations for approximately 35.88 miles of roadways in the amount of $249,755.
Commissioners, these are the roadways we are planning on, paving in the FY25 pavement management program. This consultant work will do a visual condition evaluation, do some non-destructive testing, pavement coring, material sampling, subgrade soil classification, and some laboratory testing if needed. When we get the final report, they will tell us what we should be doing to these roadways in regards to the pavement rehabilitation methods, whether it's a reclamation, a mill and pave, whether we need to add soil cement. We've used this firm previously, and we expect to get our final report in early 2025 so we can get that project going.
When you are able to, would you send us a list of the roads that are under consideration for this?
We can send a list. Depending on the recommendations, we may have to adjust that list because we only have so much money in FY25 pavement management. So if the recommendation comes back and says, oh, you need to reconstruct 2/3 of the roadways, that list of roadways is going to get shorter.
Well, I
so
totally
we can
understand
definitely
that.
share the list of what we're going to be testing, and then we'll have a final list of roadways that we will be repairing when we come back before you for the actual rehabilitation projects.
Right, I totally understand that things might change, but I certainly, having a list of what we're looking at spending money on would be helpful.
Yep, we can get that to you this afternoon.
Thank you. Motion to approve the Department of Public Works to use a term contract with WSP USA Environment and Infrastructure Incorporated for FY25 pavement testing and rehabilitation recommendations in the amount of $249,755.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody on the line for public comment?
Yes, sir, I believe we do.
You say we do?
Yes, sir. If you, public comment, if you could just use *6 to unmute. You'll have 3 minutes, if you please state your name.
Yes. Hello again. This is Catherine Adelaide, and I'm speaking as a member of the Carroll County Republican Central Committee. Just a general comment. First of all, I don't know how you guys do everything you do. I'm overwhelmed with what I do, but I do appreciate it, and I know it's hard to, stay on top of so many different important issues. But I'm here to hopefully give you up to date on what we've been doing. We're getting very busy with the election coming up. We have our next to last meeting before the election of the Carroll County Republican Central Committee. I've asked Karen Donaldson, we're meeting tonight at 6:30. I've asked Karen Donaldson, the Vice President of the Board of Elections, to speak about the appointed board members, their duties, and, kind of just how everything is going. They're high in gear right now. I have a second speaker scheduled for our meeting tonight, Stephen Leon. He's a former homicide investigator. He's the new president of the Carroll County Right to Life. He will be speaking on the abortion/transgender amendment. And that amendment really is, the abortion part of it is a Trojan horse for the transgender part. And I'll be talking more about that, later as the time goes on. In terms of elections, it's all about elections for us. We're all working hard. Every member is just working hard. Some of our members have been up already door knocking in Pennsylvania. We have our trailer open, as you may know, at the Kegel Plaza. You can get signs. It's open from 10 to 8. You can get signs there. Most of you are familiar with that there was a second Trump assassination attempt on September 15th. And on September 16th, I did coordinate a pop-up rally. Hopefully some of you saw me out there with other people from 4 to 6. I attended a Patriot Day dinner at the Tri-District Republican Club. Nicolene Ambrose was there to speak. She's the national committee woman for the MDGOP. Early voting is starting October 24th. I'll send you an election update report on that. I'm sorry, my clock went off here. So the last thing I wanted to mention was the power line issue. Initially, I was laying low on this issue because citizens were and are very active, and they were doing a great job. I believe you're all on the record as against this initiative. As a Republican, I'm against it, and as one who believes in property rights, that it will drastically change the rural agricultural character of Carroll County. Lately I'm getting some calls from constituents about it, so I thought I'd bring it up. My understanding is that you received information on coordination, and that only you, the commissioners, can stop this initiative, not the citizens and not the legislators. So I've been asked to encourage you to stay on top of this issue and vote unanimously for coordination. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I assume that was the only one?
That's all we have, sir.
Thank you. Administrative open. Any items from any commissioners? I'd like to say something, and I swear. Anne Arundel County Public Library is the first one in Maryland to be a book sanctuary. They are saying from Huck Finn to Harry Potter, a lot of our most beloved books are banned in certain places, including schools and libraries across the United States. I know of no books that are banned in libraries. I know no books that are banned in schools. They're age appropriate based on the grade. And I just hope this ridiculousness can stop. And I can only speak for one of five. If we hear that garbage in this county, I'm going to seriously look at how we fund them. Any more admin open?
Not for me, no, sir.
Agenda.
Hello, Wanda.
Okay. On Tuesday, as I said last week, I get a free breakfast if I listen to Commissioner Rothstein. I'll be there.
That's what I'm gonna talk about.
On
Sure
Wednesday.
it's worth it?
Now, I did not say that. Commissioner, I did not say
I'm
that.
saying that.
Wednesday, October 2nd, groundbreaking ceremony at Kimmy House Historical Society, Commissioner Gordon. And then later that day at 6 p.m., he'll be at Planning and Zoning Commission. On Thursday, 8 a.m., closed admin, 9 a.m., Commissioners' open session, starting with Priority Carroll. And then we do Land Acquisition Services, parcel A21, Land Acquisitions, parcel 25, purchase 6 Ford Transit high roof cargo vans. Next item, John Deere skid steer. Next item, John Deere crawler loader. Next item, Hickory Lane water main construction. Next item, Hickory Lane water main inspection. Next item, bypass for Snowden's Run pump station. Next item, Runnymede light system. Next item, Pleasant Valley light system. Next item, Freedom Water Treatment Plant residuals removal. Public comment. Open admin. At 6 p.m. that day, the Historical Society's History Shaken and Stirred in a Nutshell. Commissioner Vigliotti.
Actually, I will not be able to make that.
Okay, so right now, no one is potentially attending. Friday, no items. Saturday, celebrating American Fall History Expo Summer Adventure. I shouldn't try to read two things at once. Expiration Commons, Commissioner Kyler and Rothstein. At 4:30 p.m., annual Blue Mass at St. John Catholic Church, Commissioner Gordon, and Commissioner Vigliotti has the podcast.
Wanda, you can add me to
Warren,
the
2 consecutive
Celebrating
weeks.
America event on the 5th.
Hopefully, I'm ready
Thanks.
for it.
I bet. Good so far? Monday, October 7th, no activities. Tuesday, October 8th, 8 a.m., Shock Trauma Board of Visitors, Commissioner Rothstein. 7 p.m., Ag Center Board Meeting, Commissioner Kyler. Wednesday, October 9th, Secretary Day is visiting Carroll County, and there's a coffee here at 8 a.m. Then there's a bus ride, and then there's a stakeholder meeting, and so it's various activities with Secretary Day all day. Farm Museum Board meeting at the Farm Museum, and I assume you can't go to that because
Right, because
you're
I'll be in Tawnytown with the secretary.
in Tonytown. So right now, we have nobody attending that. And then we have the stakeholder meeting, which all 5 of us are attending. Habitat for Humanity at Pub Dog Brewery, Commissioner Kyler, which is a good group to support. At 5:15, Carroll Tech Council, the Digital Inclusion Week proclamation, Commissioner Gordon. Thursday, October 10th, 8 a.m. closed admin, 9 a.m. open session, Priority Carroll, bond authorizing resolution, development allowances, discussion of potential legislation, public comment, admin open, and agenda review, closed for public safety. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday show no activities, and Commissioner Kyler has to follow Commissioner Vigliotti with the podcast.
I suppose I could kick that to you. You know, maybe set you up at the end of my podcast.
Yes.
Say, everybody, stay tuned next
You
week.
can do a commercial for me. That would be much appreciated.
I'll make a note.
Any other activities to add? And that week looks brief, but so did next week, a week ago, so they tend to fill.
So did this week 2 weeks ago.
Any other comments? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
We have the 3 o'clock.